I've been on the road for 12 hours straight, riding the line between exhaustion and hallucination when I first saw him. A lone figure on the shoulder, half illuminated by my high beams, thumb hanging out like he'd been carved into the desert night. The highway was nothing but a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the scrub and the rock. No towns for miles. No reason for anybody to be out here. My first instinct was to keep driving. I've been warned far too many times. Don't pick up hitchhikers. But my guilt has a way of working its claws in. The longer I look at the figure shrinking in my rear view, the more it felt like I just left a body on the roadside. I don't know why I slowed, but I did. Tires humming against the asphalt as I pulled off onto the shoulder, gravel popping under the weight of my car. He jogged up, lanky and wiry, maybe in his mid-30s. Dirty jeans, canvas jacket, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. When he opened up the door, I caught the sour smell of somebody who hadn't showered in definitely a few days, maybe more. He slid in without another word, clutching a ragged backpack up against his chest like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth. "Thanks," he muttered. "No problem," I said, putting us back on the road. "Where are you heading?" He glanced out the window, eyes scanning the darkness. "Gas station, just the next one." "Long way to be walking," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "Lucky I came through, huh?" He didn't laugh, he didn't even smile, he just kept staring off into the black desert. I figured maybe he was shy or strung out or maybe both. But a few miles later, I heard him muttering under his breath. Some kind of chant maybe. I looked over and saw his lips moving, eyes fixed on the side mirror. "You okay over there?" I asked. He blinked. "We're fine," he said. "Just keep driving. Don't slow down." That sank into me. Not the kind of thing you want to hear at 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere with a stranger riding shotgun. "Don't slow down?" I asked. "They'll catch up if you do." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was telling me water was wet or the sky was blue. I gave him a nervous lap back. Who's gonna catch up?" But he didn't answer, just hugged that backpack tighter and kept looking out the window. I checked the mirror myself and my stomach knotted. A pair of headlights, distant, but they were gaining. I've been alone on the road for over an hour now, not a single car. Now suddenly there was somebody behind us. "That a friend of yours?" I asked. "No," he responded. "Just drive." I pressed the accelerator a little harder, engine whining as the speedometer climbed. The headlights behind us matched it perfectly. The car behind us stuck like glue. Every time I eased off the gas, its headlights swelled bigger in the mirror. When I pushed the pedal, it would match me, keeping just enough distance to make sure that my skin would crawl. I gripped the wheel tighter, my mouth was getting dry, while a stranger beside me muttered and clutched his backpack. "Alright, you gonna tell me what's going on?" I snapped. His voice dropped. "They followed me, I got away, but they don't let people go. Nobody gets out, not for free." "Okay, what do you mean they?" Then he turned to me, face pale in the glow from the dash. "Just keep driving." That wasn't an answer, at least not good enough for me. I tried telling myself it was a coincidence, that maybe it was just another innocent driver heading the same direction, but deep down, I think I knew better. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a pursuit. I flicked the headlights to high, leaning into the speed, 80, 85, 90. My tires buzzing against the asphalt, a low howl that made it feel like the car could lift off the road at any second. The headlights behind us grew smaller, then steadied, still keeping pace. "They're not gonna stop," that guy whispered. "Not till they have me back." I shot him another glance. His hands were trembling as they were clamped still over that backpack. What the hell's in there? "Proof." His eyes flashed in the dark. "Enough to ruin them. They can't let it get out." My blood iced over. I wanted to press for more, but there was a part of me that already knew the truth was probably uglier than I could actually stomach. Whoever these people were, they weren't just pissed off friends chasing down a runaway. It smelled bigger, dirtier. The road sign loomed up ahead of us, green letters shining gas. 15 miles. I clenched my jaw. 15 miles might as well have been 100 at this point. The car behind continued to inch closer, the glare of its high beams flooding my mirrors until I couldn't see a damn thing. The engine roared as it closed the gap. "Hold on," I barked over at him. They rammed us. Just a kiss at first. I shuddered through the frame of my car, enough to make the hitchhiker yelp. Then again a little harder, shoving us forward. My teeth rattled. I swerved, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me alive. "They're gonna force us off the road," he shouted. He was probably right, but all I could do was just brace for it. The highway curved left and I took it fast, the tires screaming against the pavement. The other car hung back for a breath, then lunged again, its headlights searing into my vision. I thought about letting him out, about slamming the brakes and tossing that stranger back on the road, handing him over to whatever nightmare he brought into my passenger seat. But I couldn't. It was too late for that now. I was in it. And then, blessed sight, the faint glow of lights on the horizon. The gas station. I floored it, praying the car wouldn't spin out before we actually made it. The station sat lonely in this island in the desert, buzzing neon signs and a couple of flickering lamps. No other cars, no other sign of life, just 4 pumps and a greasy little building squatting under the weight of the night. I slammed quickly into the lot, brakes damn near smoking, the smell of burnt rubber choking out in the air. The hitchhiker was out before we'd even fully stopped, immediately bolting for the door. I shouted at him to wait, but he was already gone, backpack slamming against his side as he sprinted inside. The other car peeled in behind us, engine growling, headlights snapping off, and for the first time I saw the shape of it, this old black sedan, windows tinted dark. The doors creaked open in unison. 2 men then stepped out, big blocky shoulders, work boots hitting the concrete with slow, heavy steps. They didn't rush, their confidence almost made my stomach turn again. One of them looked straight at me, a dead stare that pinned me to the seat. He then turned and followed that hitchhiker into the gas station. The other stayed outside, leaning up against the car, like a watchman. Now, I should have just driven off. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to floor it, get out of there, leave this stranger to whatever the hell he'd signed up for, but I sat there, frozen, my breath fogging up the windshield. My curiosity ended up being stronger than my fear, and maybe, just maybe, my guilt too. Through the door of the gas station, I could see the hitchhiker at the counter, shouting at the weary clerk. The man outside pulled something from his jacket, tucking it close to his leg. It had to be a gun. Now that broke the spell. I shoved my door open and staggered inside. My voice cracked. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" The one by the car turned his head slowly, like he couldn't believe I was dumb enough to step out. "Go home," he said, calm and quiet, the kind of voice that promised you didn't really want to hear it twice. But I was already too late. Inside the station, the hitchhiker ripped open his backpack, spilling out these papers and photos across the counter. The clerk's eyes went wide. He said something, frantic, I couldn't quite hear it through the glass. Then the second man stormed in, shoving the man against the shelves. A soda display crashed to the floor, cans rolled everywhere. The hitchhiker's voice broke through the chaos, desperate. "Call the cops. Don't let them take me back." And for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd actually be saved. Then the man with the gun raised it, leveled it, and everything froze. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, could only watch as the desert night pressed in around us. The ugly truth of what I'd stumbled into finally bared its teeth. The moment stretched like it was caught in amber. My eyes locked on the barrel of that gun, the way it glinted under those lights. The hitchhiker froze, one arm still clutching the counter, his mouth hanging open mid-plea. I wanted to move, I wanted to do something, yell, rush in, knock the gun aside like in the movies, but I was rooted to the pavement, hands trembling uselessly at my side. The man outside, the watchman, never even looked away from me. He didn't need to say another word. The message was carved in stone: stay put or join him. A thunderclap cracked inside the station. The clerk screamed. The hitchhiker dropped like his strings had been cut, a smear of red blooming across the tile. Papers scattered across the floor, photos of men in uniforms, documents stamped with logos that I couldn't quite read from where I was. Evidence, at least that's what he said. evidence that would obviously never leave that counter. The shooter knelt, grabbed the backpack, stuffed the scattered proof back inside with cold efficiency, then stood and calmly strode for the door. The clerk stood frozen behind the register, hands covering her mouth, eyes huge. Our gazes locked for a quick second, and I'll never forget that look. She knew she just witnessed something that she would never unsee. The two men stepped back out into the night, one carrying the backpack, the other wiping his hands across his jacket, and then tossed another glance at me, almost like I was less than dirt. They got back in the sedan, doors shut with muffled thuds. The engine purred to life, then they were gone, taillights shrinking back out on that black highway, just like that. I stumbled inside. The clerk was shaking, tears streaking down her cheeks, staring at the body on the floor. We need to call somebody," I stammered out. "The cops?" She shook her head violently, eyes still really wild. "No, you don't understand. You didn't see them. You didn't see them." "But he's dead." She grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt, nails digging deep. "Go, right now. Leave before they come back. Forget that you were ever here." I yanked free, but the look in her eyes was really enough. Terror, not of me, not even of the dead man bleeding in her linoleum, but of whoever those men really worked for. I backed out of the station. My car sat under those buzzing lights, engine still warm, door hanging open. I climbed back inside. The road ahead was empty again, my headlights carving out a narrow path, and I drove it like a man possessed, half expecting to see those same red taillights to reappear in my mirror now at any second. But they didn't. The highway gave me nothing but silence and distance. Hours later, when I finally hit the outskirts of the next town, I pulled into a diner lot and sat there until dawn, watching the sun crawl up over the desert. I called the police. How could I not? I made a report over the phone, and the dispatcher knew exactly what I was talking about. An officer met me at the diner an hour later to get some more details from me. It was some kind of ongoing murder investigation. I told him everything, especially about how the clerk told me to go. They said they were taking extra time to look in her as well. The vibe I got was that she was some kind of drug dealer of some kind, and the hitcher was involved with her. The cop left, and I was all alone. So I just sat there, silently, until the smell of coffee drifted out of the parking lot and the world started moving again like nothing had happened. And that's when I realized, whatever that man had been running from, it wasn't just his nightmare. He handed me a piece of it the second I let him into my car. We'd been on the road for 6 hours when I saw her. The four of us all packed into Josh's beat-up old Corolla, windows fogged from our breath, the smell of stale fries and gas station coffee turning the cabin quickly sour. College road trips always sounded better than they actually were. On paper, it was supposed to be freedom, music, inside jokes, but in reality, it was endless stretches of asphalt, cramped legs, and everybody getting irritable in waves. The highway dipped through a long stretch of pine, then spat us out by this old railroad crossing. And that's where she stood. A girl barefoot in the gravel, one arm hugging her stomach, the other stuck out half-heartedly in the universal pick-me-up gesture. Torn jeans, a hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair knotted into greasy ropes. Josh was slowing down before anybody could say a word. Dude, what are you doing?" I asked him. "What? She looks like she needs help." He squinted through the windshield. "It's freezing out there." "I don't care if it's freezing, man. This is how horror movies start." Sarah leaned forward from the back seat, voiced soft. "Come on, she actually looks our age. Would you want to be left out here?" I'll admit that shut me up because no, I wouldn't, and I knew if I was stranded, I'd pray somebody with a shred of compassion would stop for me too. So Josh pulled over. The girl walked up, quite hesitant at first, then faster when she realized we weren't driving off. She bent down and peered into the window. Up close, she looked even worse. Her lips were pale, nose was red, eyes glassy with clear exhaustion. "You headed into town?" she asked. Her voice was rough, like she'd been screaming or crying recently. "Yeah," Josh said. Hop in." She slid in the middle of the back seat, pressing close to Sarah. She smelled like sweat and dirt, that kind of dirty you can't really fake. She hugged herself tight and kept her eyes down. "Thanks," she whispered. "I just need a ride away from here." Nobody spoke for a moment. The only sound was the heater rattling weakly, trying to push back the chill. Finally, I cleared my throat. So what are you doing out here?" Her shoulders tensed. "Running." Running from what?" "It doesn't matter." She glanced up. The look in her eyes made me shut my mouth. It was wide, alert, scanning each of us like she was calculating whether we were a bigger threat than whatever she'd escaped from. Josh turned the music down. "Where do you want us to drop you off?" "Just keep driving," she said. "I'll tell you when." The four of us kind of exchanged confused looks, and nobody argued. I kept staring out the window as the pines thickened again, pressing close to the road. My stomach nodded. Something about the way she said running, not walking, not leaving, but running. It really was sticking with me. I didn't know it then, but letting her into the car meant that we'd already crossed a line that we could no longer come back from. The girl really didn't say much after that. She just stared out the window, hands buried deep in the sleeves of her hoodie, rocking slightly. Every once in a while, Sarah would try to strike up some kind of conversation. "Where are you from? Do you need to call somebody?" But the girl's answers were clipped and clearly evasive. Josh kept glancing at me in the passenger seat, his expression saying what we both were thinking. Maybe picking her up hadn't been such a great idea, but none of us had the guts to actually say it out loud. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No towns, no lights, just the highway. I finally turned around, trying to sound casual. "You said you needed a ride into town, right? Which town?" She blinked, like she hadn't really thought that far ahead. "Just keep going. I'll know when." I didn't like that answer. "Look, we can drop you off at a gas station or a diner or something, somewhere safe." Her eyes flicked to mine, very cold-like. "I said, I'll tell you when." The way she said that sent a ripple through the car. Sarah leaned back, folding her arms. Evan, who'd been quiet the whole trip, finally muttered, "Creepy." Josh cleared his throat. "All right, we're not gonna go too far off route though. We still got a long drive ahead of us." That's when she spoke up again. "There's a shortcut up ahead. Turn right at the next dirt road." I frowned. Okay, shortcut to where exactly?" "To town." Her lips twitched into something that might have been a smile, though it never really reached her eyes. Josh's hands tightened on the wheel. I could see the hesitation clearly on him, but he was always too trusting in people. "All right, I guess if it's quicker." The dirt road appeared out of the darkness, a thin strip vanishing into heavy woods. Josh turned onto it. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. The headlights cut this narrow tunnel through the trees. Every nerve in my body was screaming that this is wrong. This isn't what we should be doing. We hadn't passed another car in an hour, and now we're leaving the only highway that actually might lead to somewhere. But the girl just leaned back in her seat, finally looking relaxed, and that really scared me more than anything else. "See?" she said. "Told you." The deeper we went, the worse it continued to feel, though. No houses, no mailboxes, just trees and blackness. The dirt road narrowed rougher with every bend, until it felt less like a road now and more like a trail. Evan leaned forward between the seats. "Dude, this is not a shortcut. There's no way." Josh slowed down a little. "How much further?" "Not far," the girl responded back. I twisted in my seat to face her again. "Look, I don't really know what's going on, but this doesn't feel right. Where exactly are you taking us?" "Almost there." Again, the way she talks, the way she said everything, it was really starting to terrify me. And then the first set of headlights appeared off in the trees to the left, half hidden, then another on the right. Parked vehicles, their shapes hulking in the dark. A pickup, an SUV, another car. My chest went cold. "Josh," I said, "turn around now." Before he could do much, the figures stepped out of the trees, 3, 4, 5 of them, shadows moving up the road, lit up in the headlights. Men, big men, their faces cast in shadow, but their posture said everything we needed to know. They'd been waiting for us. Josh slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, dust clouding the beams. The girl straightened up, suddenly more calm and collected. She looked at us, finally meeting each of our eyes in turn. "Hey, thanks for the ride," she said. The doors opened and the men started toward us, slow and steady. One had a flashlight. Another held something heavier, maybe a pipe, maybe a bat. My stomach immediately flipped. Sarah gasped out loud. "Oh my God." Evan swore under his breath. "She set us up. She fucking set us up." Josh fumbled for reverse, tires spinning as the car jerked backwards. The men then surged forward, shouting, hands pounding on the hood. One yanked at the driver's handle. Another pounded the glass by my head. "Go, go!" I screamed. Josh floored it. The Corolla jolted backward, swerving off the road and then into a ditch. The bumper slammed hard into the dirt, and the tires squealed as he fought for the wheel. One of the men slipped in front of us, and Josh swerved again, missing him only by inches. The girl didn't move. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, watching us like we were nothing more than a delivery that had arrived early. We hit the dirt road again, fishtailing. The men shouted, one of them running after us for a few yards before fading off into the dark. The headlights of the parked vehicle snapped on, and the engines roared to life. "They're coming," Sarah said. I twisted in my seat. Sure enough, beams of lights were cutting through the dust, bearing down fast. Josh was white-knuckling the wheel. "Hold on," he barked. The Corolla screamed down the trail, bouncing over ruts, barely holding together. The trees whipped past in a blur. My heart was currently in my throat, waiting for the moment one of those bigger trucks to ram us from behind, flip us back into a ditch. But somehow, by some miracle, we burst back out onto the highway. The other vehicles didn't seem to be following either. We drove in silence, every one of us heaving for breath, hearts pounding like war drums. Nobody dared to speak, not even Sarah this time. Finally, I turned around, and the back seat was empty. The girl was gone. The silence in the car was heavier than anything I've ever felt. All 4 doors were locked. Engine was screaming down a highway, but the space between Sarah was now empty. The hoodie, the bare feet, the sour smell, gone, like she'd never even been there. Josh's voice cracked. Where the fuck did she go?" "She was just right," Sarah stammered out, spinning around, her hand patting the seat like the girl might have slipped under it somehow. "She was just here." "No fucking way," Evan muttered, shaking his head. His face was ghost white. "No way. She got out back there. She must have, when the guys were on us." But I was watching. I saw her sitting perfectly still, hands folded. She hadn't moved a muscle when we tore out of that trap. There hadn't been time for her to jump out. No chance she could have slipped free without us noticing it. But she must have, right? "Look, it doesn't matter how, she's gone now, and we need to keep driving." Josh didn't argue with me. He pushed the car a little harder. None of us looked back, terrified we'd see those headlights flaring up in the distance again. It wasn't until nearly an hour later, when the lights of a real town finally glowed on the horizon, that anybody spoke up. Sarah's voice was barely audible. She wasn't running from anyone. And we all know she was right. She didn't need saving. She'd been bait, dangled out there like meat on a hook, waiting for some bleeding heart idiot to scoop her up and deliver her straight to the jaws of whatever the hell operation those men were running. We rolled into town just after dawn, pulling into a diner lot like survivors. We didn't even go inside, we just sat there, faces pale, eyes empty. I kept thinking about her last words when she was in the car. Almost there. She hadn't been talking about any town. She'd been talking about the trap, and we'd driven her right to it. Even now, years later, when I pass a lone hitchhiker on some forgotten back road, I grip the wheel and keep driving because I know better. Some people aren't running from danger. Some people are the danger. The cabin was perfect. It was a 2-bedroom tucked into the pine trees about 20 minutes outside of Mendocino. Little wraparound porch, string lights, one of those open concept kitchens with big windows, and this absurdly deep farmhouse sink. I loved every inch of that damn place. We booked it for our 3-year anniversary, just me and Alyssa. No kids, no work, no phone signal. I remember the first thing that she said when we walked in was, "It smells weird in here." I laughed, but she didn't. The host, Lorraine, had left this note on the countertop, handwritten. It said, "Welcome Brandon and Alyssa. Please make yourselves at home. There's wine in the fridge, firewood stacked out back, and a telescope on the deck. Enjoy the view. Sunsets here are everything. One note, the closet in the master bedroom is locked for storage. Please don't try to force it. Thank you." That was that. Warm, casual, totally normal, right? We unpacked, poured some wine, and took 100 selfies with the trees in the background. Everything felt pretty easy, except that closet. It was on the far wall of the bedroom, standard size, stock white door with this old silver padlock on the latch. Not some high-end combo lock, just one of those clunky ones you can get at pretty much any hardware store. At first, I really didn't say anything, but Alyssa began noticing me glancing at it throughout the night, even while we brushed our teeth. "You're gonna be weird about that closet the whole trip, huh?" "No," I said back. "It's just a locked door and a house that's supposed to be ours for the weekend." "Storage," she reminded me. "She said so in the note." "But storage for what? It's a vacation rental, not a personal cabin. And that padlock looked pretty new." We laughed it off and went to bed early. And that was the last normal night that we had inside that house. The next day, we were pretty busy. Coffee on the porch, a hike through the redwoods, took more dumb selfies at this overlook, and watched a hawk dive right through the fog. It was a perfect day. Still, every time we came back into the bedroom, my eyes would go straight back to that closet. It didn't do anything, it just sat there, unmoving and locked. But for me, it made that whole room feel off balance, like a splinter in your finger, small and visible, but always there, always present. That night while Alyssa showered, I walked over to it, ran my hand along the grain of the wood. The padlock was old school, a solid metal shackle, key entry. I didn't touch it, just leaned in close. And I could swear when I did so, I heard breathing. Not loud, not even clear, just a faint, steady shift of air. I backed away and almost tripped over the nightstand. When Alyssa came out, towel wrapped around and smiling at me, I didn't say anything to her. I didn't want to ruin the night. We watched a movie, split the last of that wine, and then crawled into bed by 10. But sometime after midnight, I woke up. At first, groggily, I really wasn't sure why, but then I heard it, a soft thump from the closet. Not loud or frantic, just a dull, solid noise, like something shifting inside it. I held my breath, and then another thump, followed by a scratch. I reached over and Alyssa was dead asleep. The house was quiet, no pipes, no wind, no creaking floorboards, just that sound from the closet. I sat up, heart pounding, and just stared at the door. The padlock was still there. I got up and walked over, pressed my ear to the door. Nothing though. I waited a little longer. Then, right at the edge of my hearing, I heard it again, breathing. I sat up and didn't sleep the rest of the night, and the next morning, I told Alyssa. She laughed at me at first, thought I was winding her up or something, but when she saw my face, she stopped. "What kind of sound?" she asked me. "Thumping, scratching, breathing. I know how all that sounds, but it's what I heard." She stared at the closet and bit her lip. Do you think there's like a animal maybe in there? Too big. What do you mean too big? I don't know the sound, it just felt big, like human. She stepped closer to the closet and looked at the padlock. It's the same one, right? Yeah. We debated about calling the host, and eventually Alyssa wound up sending a text. Hey, Brandon thought he heard something in the closet last night. Just want to make sure there's no animal or any issues. Thanks. We waited and didn't get a response. We checked our signal. No bars, so we tried the Wi-Fi. It's still out. That's when I remembered the welcome book saying there was a landline in the kitchen. I picked it up and, of course, no dial tone. That afternoon, Alyssa went to go lie down. I stood in the kitchen staring at the fridge, trying to psych myself up to make some kind of lunch. And then I took note of something. The wine bottle. It was on the counter. I know we left it on the coffee table. I walked into the living room, blanket folded, TV remote placed neatly in the center of the rug. Not how we left that either. Alyssa for sure hadn't done it. I asked her, and she swore she didn't. Then we realized we'd both been outside for a while earlier. Alone. Not long, but enough. Somebody had been inside. That night we barricaded the bedroom door with the dresser. Not because of the closet, because of everything else. No cell, no internet, no way to call out. Something had changed. We aren't alone out here. Not really. Alyssa tried her best to stay calm, but her eyes kept darting back and forth to that closet. What if... She whispered to me. What if somebody's living in there? Her words sat in the air like smoke. I didn't answer her. At exactly 2:14 a.m., that scratching started up again. And then, the knob turned. I watched it turn. The padlock held, but something pulled, really hard. I watched the wood flex. Alyssa was awake now. She saw it too and clapped her hand over her mouth. We didn't move or breathe. Then the noise stopped and we waited. Long enough to convince ourselves, hopefully, it was over. Then came a voice from inside that closet. A dry, whispery rasp. I'm cold. When the sun was up, we left. Didn't pack, didn't clean, didn't say goodbye. Just grabbed our shoes, our phones, and ran. The front door was still locked, but that back slider unlatched. We didn't look in the closet again. We didn't really want to know at this point what was behind it because whatever or whoever was in there wanted us to open it. And we almost did. 15 miles later, we hit the first gas station with signal. Alyssa called the sheriff's department in Mendocino County, filed a report, gave them the address, told them everything, word for word. The dispatcher was polite, said they'd send somebody out, but when we followed up 3 days later, there was no report filed. No record of anything at that cabin at the address, no listing under Lorraine's name. When I checked the rental site, the listing was gone, wiped clean, no history, no reviews, nothing, like it never even existed. Occasionally at night, I found myself thinking back to that voice, the way it sounded like it hadn't spoken in weeks, the way it said just those two words, cold. That wasn't a threat, but I don't really know what it was. I think if we answered back, if we had said anything back, if we tried to help, I'm not sure we would have made it out. We might be part of the closet now too. And then somebody else would be reading Lorraine's welcome note, drinking her wine, ignoring the locked door on that far wall. It was only supposed to be for one night, just a crash pad on the way to Flagstaff. Me and my friend Nate road tripping from LA, trying to make it to his cousin's wedding without coughing up any hotel money. We found this little place in the desert outside Kingman, cheap and clean. A small adobe-style house off a dirt road with gravel driveway and a sagging porch. It had character, 4 stars, no real red flags. And it was available for that one night only. I snapped it up in 5 minutes flat. We got there just around 8 p.m. Sun was already gone, air still warm around us. My phone was on 3% battery, but I had the check-in instructions saved. Thank God. Key under the fake rock by the front steps. Simple enough. I grabbed it and walked to the door and stopped because, well, it was already open. Just slightly. Nate glanced over at me. Did you open it? No, dude, I just got the key. He slowly pushed it the rest of the way open and the lights were on. We both stood there for a second, long enough to notice the TV flickering in the living room, and a beer can on the kitchen island, and a pair of sandals by the door. Somebody was already here. I double-checked the listing. August 12th, one night, 2 guests. Reservation confirmed. Then a voice from inside. Hello? 2 people stepped around the corner. A couple, mid-30s maybe, normal looking, slightly confused. Just like us. A guy was holding his phone. Are you the owners? No, I said back. We booked this place tonight. They both immediately looked at each other. So did we. So we both pulled up our confirmations. Same address, same date, same check-in instructions. Nate and the guy walked outside to call the host, and of course, no answer. I stayed in the kitchen, awkwardly sipping water from the sink while the woman made small talk. This is nuts, she said. We stayed at like 20 rentals. This has never happened to us. We agreed to be chill, said it was probably some kind of glitch. Look, let's just stay on opposite ends of the house, the guy said, and we'll leave first thing in the morning. It wasn't ideal, but we were both really tired. The place had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. There was plenty of space. I guess we figured we can survive one night. But we shouldn't have stayed, because those people weren't who they said they were, and by morning, only 1 pair of shoes was still by the front door. That first hour was completely fine. We stayed in our room, and they stayed in theirs. Everybody was making these nervous jokes about tech glitches and modern problems. I played music low on my phone while Nate scrolled through Instagram, and eventually we both started to nod off. Then, out of nowhere, the lights go out, and not just in our room, the whole house. A hard click like a breaker's flipping. Nate sat up. Hey, you hear that? I opened up the door. The hallway was pitch black. Hey, I called out. You guys good? No answer. I stepped forward and the floorboards creaked below me. That kind of creak you feel in your bones more than your actual ears. I found the kitchen by memory, grabbed my phone for light and aimed it around me. The breaker panel was just outside on the porch, so I went to the front door. I stopped. The sandals that were there earlier now were gone, and a breeze was moving through the house. Then a door slammed somewhere in the back. We got the power back on by flipping the main breaker, but the other couple didn't come out of the room after that. Nate knocked once lightly. Hey, everything all right in there? He was only met with silence. We went back to our room and locked the door, and that's when we noticed something. My duffel bag was now open. Not how I left that. Nate's wallet was on the floor, cards pulled halfway out. He picked it up slowly. Did you? I shook my head. We sat there for a long time, not talking, just listening. Every now and again, there'd be a soft shuffle in the hall, and once I heard water run for 5 seconds, then shut off. Around 3 a.m., I had to piss, but I didn't want to leave the room. I couldn't hold it anymore. I eased the door open, barefoot, phone in hand. The hallway light was off again. I crept toward the bathroom, passing the living room, and stopped cold. The woman was standing there, in the corner, not moving, just standing, barefoot, facing the wall, arms down at her sides. Almost like she'd been placed there, full Blair Witch bullshit. I froze and she didn't react, not even when the floor creaked under my feet. I backed up slowly and made it to the bathroom and locked the door. Inside, the cabinet under the sink was wide open. Inside that, my backpack. All right, I'm done. Time to fucking bounce. I woke Nate, told him what I saw, and he didn't argue. We threw our shit together fast and made for the front door. And now it was locked. Not deadbolted but chained from the inside. That chain had not been there when we arrived. Nate moved to unlock it. That's when the guy stepped out of the second bedroom right behind him, and he had a bat in his hand, aluminum, clean, and brand new. "You guys leaving already?" he asked. I moved between them slowly. Yeah, we're heading out, early start." He smiled. "You sure? You've only been here for a few hours." And that's when I noticed this scar, a thick white line across his throat, like somebody had already tried to cut him a long time ago. He saw me looking and his smile widened. From behind me, the woman whispered, "We just wanted some company." Nate unlocked the chain and I yanked the door open, and we both ran. Didn't stop until we hit the car. We jumped in, slammed the doors, and started it up with shaking hands. They didn't follow. They just stood in the doorway, watching us drive away. We filed a report the next morning. Cops visited the rental, found nothing. No couple, no bat, no signs of any kind of break-in. When they pulled the reservation logs from the property manager, there was only one booking listing for that night, ours. They checked the key logs, only one use on the key box, ours. There's no sign or record of anybody else being there. And the strange part, the owners hadn't rented that house in almost a year, said that they'd taken it offline after a break-in. When the property manager asked us who gave us the link, we pulled it up and of course, listing gone, wiped. The only thing left in the browser history was this weird dead redirect, something called sharebnb.co/justforyou. We waited weeks for answers and there never were any. A cop said the locks hadn't been tampered with, the host hadn't given out any kind of spare key. No prints besides ours, no damage, no physical evidence, no nothing. They treated us like we were exaggerating something, maybe mistaken, maybe high. But I remember the bat. I remember the woman staring at the wall like she was possessed. I remember my backpack moved into a space that I hadn't touched, a very weird one at that. We tried to track that link again, sharebnb.co/justforyou, but it was gone. Even the cached version led nowhere, a blank page with the words, "Thank you for booking." And beneath that, in this tiny gray font, "More guests arrive every day." We booked that cabin because we wanted some kind of quiet. My wife Laura needed a break from work and the kids were burnt out from school, and I just wanted to feel like a man again. Build some fires, grill some steaks, let my youngest shoot a BB gun at cans from the deck, pretend that we were pioneers instead of just tired people from Phoenix. It was a rental just outside of Pine Top, up past the ski cabins and seasonal condos, far enough away from the main road that the last stretch was all dirt and pine needles. The photos made it look rustic, but clean. Big stone fireplace, bunk beds, a wraparound porch with a hot tub that barely worked but looked really great in those pictures. And no cell service. That was really the appeal to us. No buzzing or news, no texts from work, just the five of us, me, Lauren, our teenage daughter Emma, and the twins, Ryan and Blake, 9 years old and always yelling about something. We got there on a Thursday afternoon. Weather was perfect. The air had that high country scent, half pine, half soil, like the whole mountain was freshly watered. We unpacked, picked bedrooms, and let the kids explore the trails behind the house. It really did feel like a reset. Dinner was burgers on the grill, sunset through the trees, s'mores over the fire pit. Emma rolled her eyes at the twins and pretended not to be having fun. Laura sipped red wine from a camping mug and said, "We should do this every year." It really was the kind of night that you don't realize you'll miss until it's gone. Then a knock came at 3 a.m., 3 sharp raps, right at the front door. I sat up in bed, heart pounding like I'd been yanked from underwater. Laura whispered to me, "What was that?" "I don't know. Stay here." I grabbed the fireplace poker and crept down the stairs barefoot. The knock didn't come again. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing, just moonlight and trees. So I opened up the door. Nobody there, no footprints, no wind, just the cold, quiet woods and the sound of blood in my ears. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt and checked the windows one by one. Still didn't see anything. Not a branch out of place, not even a breeze. So I told myself maybe it was an animal, a falling pine cone. Hell, maybe the twins left something against the door that tipped over. Now, I didn't believe it, of course, but I needed to say it. Laura didn't ask any questions when I got back into bed. Just pulled the blanket tighter and slid closer to me. The next morning, I checked the front porch again. Still nothing, but there were boot prints and they weren't ours. They weren't there the day before either. Big ones, treaded. Not hiking boots, work boots. I followed them. They started down the gravel drive and led up to the porch steps and then stopped at the front door. No return trail though, just a set of tracks coming in from the woods. I didn't tell Laura. I just kept an eye out. Didn't let the kids go exploring that day. Said there were bears in the area and I didn't want to risk it. I checked my phone. Still no service. I tried the cabin's emergency Wi-Fi hotspot and of course it was dead. The landline by the kitchen was unplugged. Some frayed wires with no dial tone. No signal, no internet, no fallback. It was just us. That night I locked everything down. Windows, curtains, and I left the outside lights on. But at 3 a.m. once more, the knocking came back. Same rhythm, same 3 knocks. This time, Laura actually heard it too. She sat up straight first, eyes wide. That's not an animal. I nodded back at her. She reached for her phone, but I already knew it was no help. I got out of bed and grabbed that same poker and moved slowly down the hallway. When I reached the living room, I didn't go to the door right away this time. I looked out the side window first and saw somebody standing on the porch. Not moving, not speaking, just standing. His face was in shadow, wearing something heavy like a jacket, arms at his sides, head tilted slightly like he was listening. Then, like he felt me watching, he turned and looked straight at the window, and I quickly ducked out of view. I didn't breathe, I didn't blink, and when I looked again, he was gone. I didn't sleep and stayed up the rest of the night, and at sunrise I walked the perimeter. Boot prints were everywhere this time, around the porch, around the sides, by the window, even at the back door, like he'd been circling while we slept. When I went to check our SUV, the tires were slashed, all 4, clean cuts. Then I had to tell Laura everything, the guy, the footprints, the tires. I thought that she'd fall apart. Instead, she went into triage mode, packed snacks, filled the bathtubs, charged flashlights, and the kids started asking questions we didn't want to answer. I found a trail cam nailed to a pine tree just off the back deck, and that wasn't ours, not part of the listing at least, and definitely not mentioned in the binder. I pulled a card and popped it into my laptop. Each file was named by timestamp, and each one was a photo, black and white, motion triggered. At first, all of the files were us, unpacking the car, kids running down the trail, me at the grill. Then came the night shots, us through the window, sleeping, sitting at dinner, Laura brushing her teeth, me reading a book, all taken from that tree line. Then the final file, it was from the night before, a full body shot. That man, standing on the porch, inches from the door, looking into the camera, his face lit by the porch light. Not a ski mask, no balaclava, just a man's face, plain and unbothered. That night we took turns watching the windows. Laura kept the kids in our room, reading bedtime stories, and she didn't finish. At 3 a.m. we heard footsteps on the roof. That wasn't a bird or the wind. Footsteps, slow and creeping. It went from one side of the house to the other. I raised that poker, and Laura grabbed the fire extinguisher. We waited. A soft clatter then came from the chimney. At dawn, I spotted something on the back deck, nailed to the railing with a screwdriver. A photo, one of the trail cam prints. Our family sitting at dinner, Emma smiling, Laura was mid-laugh and me mid-bite. Scrawled across the bottom in thick black marker, "Thank you for staying." We left as soon as the sun cleared, didn't even drive the SUV, we hiked out. Me still with that fire poker, Laura with the twins, and Emma dragging a duffel bag. It took us almost 2 hours on foot to reach the main road. I flagged down a tow truck, and the guy thought I was crazy until I showed him the photo. He didn't really ask many questions after that, just nodded and gave us a ride back into town. He even agreed to go pick up our car after we gave him the address. The police were polite, not helpful. They took my statement, looked at the tire tracks, the trail cam, the prints in the dirt, said they'd check the local trail cams, maybe put in a request for footage from nearby hunting blinds. But without a name or suspect, I knew nothing would really come of it. It was just another trespassing incident. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no real damage. When I asked him about the trail cam, the deputy just shrugged at me. There's a lot of creeps out there, and some just want to watch.
Caleb, Emma, Josh, and I shared a house off campus with this girl named Mia, who had just moved in a few weeks back. She was the quiet type. You know, the one who mostly keeps to themselves. But she was extremely jumpy. The girl would flinch if a door slammed too hard or if someone walked up behind her. We all noticed it, but nobody really thought much of it. That Friday, we were sitting around the living room chugging beers when Caleb brought up this TikTok prank video. Some guys pretended to break into their friend's house while he was sleeping, scaring the hell out of him. "We should totally try that on Mia," Emma giggled. "Bet she'd jump high enough to hit the ceiling." Too wasted to think straight, we nodded. Caleb grabbed a ski mask from his Halloween costume and a fake knife from the same set. Plastic, obviously, if you looked close enough, but in the dark, it could pass. For real. The plan was simple. Caleb would burst in wearing the mask and scare the hell out of Mia. I'd silently record it on my phone, and we'd all laugh about it later. Maybe post the video if it was funny enough. Around 11:30, Mia went to her room. We gave her 15 minutes to settle in. Then, Caleb pulled on the mask. He slammed the front door and stomped through the house, making it sound like a break-in. "Stay quiet and you won't get hurt," he shouted. We heard Mia's door slam shut. Caleb looked back at us, grinning under the mask, and headed down the hallway. I followed with my phone recording. Emma and Josh were right behind me. Caleb kicked Mia's door open and rushed in, waving the fake knife. What happened next took maybe 3 seconds, but I remember every detail. Mia shot up from the bed with a butcher knife in her hand. She moved faster than I thought a person could move. 1 second, she was curled there. The next, she was swinging the knife like her life depended on it. The blade went straight into Caleb's side. Caleb screamed and stumbled into the hall. The ski mask slipped off his head. Blood spread across his shirt, soaking through as he fell against the wall. That's when Mia saw his face. She knew it was Caleb, but nothing stopped her. Her eyes looked wrong and empty, like she wasn't really seeing him. She just raised her knife again and drove it into his back. Emma screamed, telling her to stop, telling her it was a prank, but Mia didn't stop. She let out this raw animal scream and came at us, the knife still dripping. Caleb was on the floor trying to crawl away, leaving a dark trail across the wood. I grabbed Emma and yanked her back. Josh was already gone. We bolted for the bathroom at the end of the hall. I shoved Emma inside and slammed the door behind us, locking it just as Mia hit it from the other side. She started pounding. Each hit rattled the door harder than the last. "Open the door!" she screamed. "Open the door right now!" "Mia, please!" Emma sobbed, pressed against the far wall. "Please, it was just a prank. We didn't mean to hurt you." The pounding stopped. For a second, I thought she'd calmed down. Then the doorknob started shaking as if any second it'd come off its hinges. "She's gonna break it down," I whispered, scanning the room for a way out. The bathroom had a small window that opened to the side yard. I shoved Emma toward it while Emma kept jerking the handle, harder and harder. I could hear her panting through the crack in the door. Emma got the window open and climbed out. I was halfway through when I heard the wood splinter. She was breaking down the door. I fell out of the window and hit the bushes hard. Emma grabbed my arm and yanked me up. We ran around out front, hearts pounding. Our breath fogged the air. We eventually called the cops and paramedics. When the ambulance and police arrived, they found Mia sitting on the floor next to Caleb, covered in his blood. The knife was on the ground beside her, and she was rocking back and forth. The paramedics got Caleb on a stretcher and rushed him out. One of the EMTs told us that if the knife had gone half an inch to the left, he wouldn't have made it. The police separated us and took statements. And when they interrogated Mia, we got the shocking truth. She'd been attacked in her apartment 6 months before moving in with us. Some guy broke in while she was sleeping and held her at knife point for hours. She'd never told us, just said she didn't like living alone. Her therapist confirmed she had severe PTSD. She'd have panic attacks and couldn't sleep without medication. She kept the knife by her bed because she couldn't feel safe without it. And we'd recreated her worst nightmare as a prank. The detective kept asking why we thought it was a good idea. I didn't have an answer. Caleb spent a week in the hospital. When he came home, his parents wanted to press charges against Mia, but the DA said it was self-defense. She genuinely believed that someone was attacking her. Mia moved out that same night. I haven't seen her since. The house felt wrong after that. We could still see the bloodstains on the hallway even after we scrubbed them out a dozen times. Emma moved out first, then Josh. Caleb dropped out of school. Last I heard, he's back doing therapy for PTSD now. I can't even watch prank videos without feeling sick, let alone do it. That night taught me something I wish I'd known sooner. When you mess with someone's fear, you're taking a gamble. You think it's harmless, that they'll laugh it off later, but you never really know what you're waking up to. I'd wanted to be in Jess's circle since freshman year. She was a bit reckless, but she was cool and had the right friends, and that charm that made professors love her. So, when I got paired to room with her sophomore year, it felt like hitting a jackpot. Our other roommate was Leah, this quiet girl who mostly kept to herself. She was fine, just boring. And Jess hated boring. After a few failed attempts to invite her to parties, Jess started getting annoyed. It's like living with a ghost. One night, Jess was muttering about what a stuck-up witch Leah is, and I was forcing laughter to play along. Amidst the harmless banter, Jess brought up Sora AI, which could make realistic videos of anyone doing anything. What if we make it look like our roommate isn't as innocent as she acts? That's kind of messed up, Jess. It's just a harmless prank, Riley. It'll be funny. I should have stopped her. Instead, I just sat there and watched as Jess created the videos. The first one showed Leah at the campus bookstore, slipping textbooks into her bag. The next had her cheating on an exam. Then, one of her making out with a young professor. By morning, those videos were in every group chat, campus forum, and even professors' inboxes. By lunchtime, people were filming her walking past them, adding captions like, "Liars spotted." I saw Leah that evening. She looked destroyed, like she had cried for hours. Her eyes were red and her hands were trembling. "That's not me," she kept muttering. "I'd never do that." I told Jess that maybe we should come clean, but she just rolled her eyes and said, "And ruined the joke? Relax, Riley. It'll blow over by tomorrow." But it didn't. That night, Leah didn't sleep. I could hear her pacing for hours, muttering that people were watching her through their screens. Around midnight, the door slammed open. I jolted up. Leah was standing in the doorway, backlit by the hallway. In her right hand, she was holding the kitchen scissors we used to open packages. "Leah?" Jess whispered, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "You did this. You made the videos." Leah's voice cracked. Jess laughed nervously. "Okay, you seriously need to chill. Nobody made anything. You're freaking out over..." "Don't lie. You used that stupid program. I can tell." I sat up. "Leah, just..." "All right, even if I did, it was a joke." "Jesus, Leah, it's not like anyone actually..." "It was my face, Jess." Leah's voice got louder. Leah, please, just put the scissors down. We can fix. It's everywhere, Leah sobbed. People won't stop talking. Matthew tore up my assignment today, said there's no point in pretending if I'm just gonna sleep my way to A's. The dean wants to see me tomorrow. I thought maybe I'd just end it tonight. But then I realized, even if I'm gone, you'll keep making more of me. Another fake Leah for your sick fun. My stomach dropped. I could see her raising the scissors while making short steps toward Jess. So maybe the only way to stop it is to stop you. Leah paused, staring at Jess with bloodshot eyes. Then, screaming like a hungry wolf, she lunged. I heard a wet thud followed by Jess's croaky wheeze. Leah, stop! I shrieked, horrified. Jess was trying to get away, crawling backwards, but Leah grabbed a fistful of Jess's hair and yanked her back down. Jess screamed. I jumped to my feet and tried to intervene, but Leah shoved me away. I could smell blood in the air. She climbed on top of Jess and rained punches all over her face. I grabbed Leah's shoulders, begging her to stop, but she was out of control. She whipped around, her face inches from mine. Her eyes didn't look human anymore. They were wide and glowing. Jess's blood was smeared across her chin. Before I could move away, her hands curled around my throat. The pressure was instant. I couldn't breathe. I clawed at her arms, but she didn't flinch. The room started spinning. Black spots bloomed in my vision. I had no other choice. I kicked her. She stumbled back, letting me go. I rolled onto my side, gasping, coughing. Jess was in the corner, holding her bleeding scalp. She probably never expected her prank could take such a sinister turn. Leah picked up the scissors again. It wasn't funny, Leah kept repeating. I started crawling towards the door. My hands slipped on something slick. Behind me, Jess made a sound like air escaping before silence took over. I somehow made it to the hallway and screamed until the doors opened and someone grabbed my shoulders. Security had to drag Leah off Jess. She was still thrashing blindly and repeating those words. Jess had to spend a month in the hospital. Leah stabbed her in the stomach, resulting in 20 stitches. Not just that, Jess also ended up with a fractured skull and lots of cuts and bruises all over her arms and legs. She was expelled for the deepfake videos. We lost contact. I dropped out 2 weeks later. Couldn't handle everyone staring. Leah got charged with assault. Her lawyer said she had a breakdown from harassment. I wasn't charged because I didn't make the videos, but everyone knew I was the front row spectator. The case made headlines as the deepfake incident. Professors turned it into a case study. Journalists called it a glimpse of the future. But behind all that noise, I kept hearing one question. If a lie can look that real, how long before the truth stops mattering at all? I tell myself I was scared, that I didn't know it would get this bad, that I'm a victim too. But late at night, I know that's bullshit. I could have stopped it. I didn't because I kept telling myself people would figure it out, that no one would believe a 30-second clip over a person they'd known for months, that the truth would be obvious, but it wasn't. Leah's in a psychiatric facility now, probably will be for years. Her whole life's gone because we thought a prank would be funny. It happened the summer I turned 17. My cousin Rowan came to crash at our place for the weekend. He'd always been a scaredy cat. He'd get scared of the dark, bugs, and basically anything that moves. My friends and I used to mess with him all the time. It was harmless, just for laughs. Or at least that's what I thought. Our house backed up to this old graveyard that's been there since the 1800s. Most people don't even know it's there, hidden behind a bunch of trees and this rusty old fence. The graves are ancient. Its headstones are covered in moss, and nobody goes there except maybe on Memorial Day. Friday night, we were watching horror movies when Rowan started talking about this girl, Madison, from his school. He had a huge crush on her, but was too scared to make a move. That's when it hit me. It'd be the perfect prank. I had this old Halloween dummy in the garage that looked realistic enough in the dark. My plan was simple. I would set it up on the stone bench near the back fence, then catfish Rowan into thinking Madison wanted to meet him there. He'd see the dummy, freak out, and I'd get the whole thing on video. Saturday afternoon, while Rowan was inside gaming, I set everything up. I propped the dummy on the bench so it looked like someone had slumped over and threw one of my mom's old jackets on it. The bench sat maybe 50 yards from the fence, surrounded by overgrown graves. It looked creepy as hell, and I couldn't wait to see Rowan's face. That night, around 10:30, I texted him from a fake number pretending to be Madison. I flirted with him for a bit, and I asked him to come meet me at the old graveyard bench at 11. Bro, Madison wants to meet me at the graveyard at 11. He shoved his phone in my face, grinning like an idiot. You coming? I shrugged. I don't know, man. Graveyard at 11? It sounds like a setup. Come on, he said, still smiling. Don't make me go alone. I pretended to think about it, like I had better things to do, then said, all right, fine, but if she's not there, you owe me a mac and cheese. We grabbed flashlights and climbed the fence around 11. It was dead quiet except for the crickets and the soft howls of the wind. The graveyard was lit just enough to see shapes. Everything else was shadows. We walked between the graves. Our flashlights cut through the dark. Rowan kept checking his phone, asking if I thought Madison was already there. When we got close, I pointed my flashlight toward the bench. The light hit, and my stomach dropped. 2 figures were sitting there. One was the dummy, right where I left it. But next to it sat a man, perfectly still, head tilted sideways. He was humming a lullaby, soft and slow, like he was putting a baby to sleep. I whispered, maybe Madison brought her brother. Rowan gave me this look. Not funny, man. Relax, I said, pretending it was fine. Probably just... Suddenly, the man stopped humming. His neck made this awful popping sound, like the bones didn't want to move as he turned toward us. The beam hit his face, and I swear my heart just froze. His eyes were slick and shiny, and something was leaking out of them. It dripped down his cheeks and caught the light. He reached over and brushed the dummy's hair tenderly, like it was flirting with his lover. My wife looked just like this when I killed her, he purred. My blood went cold. For a second, Rona and I stood there dumbfounded, the man still staring at us with a vicious smile. Suddenly, an owl hooted nearby, and I realized my prank had gone too far. Rowan whispered to me, asking why is there a dummy on the bench, and who is that man? But I had no answers. I just whispered back, we need to leave. All of a sudden, the man got up from the bench and slowly walked closer to us. Don't be scared. Come, let's sit all together and sing. It would be fun. I grabbed Rona and bolted like our lives depended on it. Behind us, footsteps crunched through the dead leaves. We could also hear his spine-chilling laughter. It was louder now, chasing us through the graves. Rowan tripped over, but I yanked him up. The footsteps were getting closer. His laughter was still echoing into the night. We hit the fence and threw ourselves over it. When I looked back, the man was standing there at the bars, one hand reaching through. He was still laughing and waving at us. We got home and locked every door. We stayed up all night with the lights on. When I finally calmed down, I told Rowan about the prank. He was no doubt upset to hear about the fake messages and about the dummy, but I swore I had no idea who that man was. Both of us stayed awake the entire night, fearing the man had followed us home. Every small sound made us flinch. The next morning, I realized I dropped my phone. I had to go back. I went alone in daylight. The dummy was gone. The bench was empty, but my phone was lying in the grass with its screen cracked. I never told my parents. I know they would blame me for being stupid and risking our lives. Rowan didn't talk to me for a week. His anger is justified. I still see Rowan on the weekends, but he never stays out after dark. I know he still thinks about that man, how he was stroking the dummy's hair like it was something precious. We both will never forget about what he said he did to his wife.
I always took the shortcut. Everybody kept telling me that I was stupid, that if I just stuck to the main street, I'd be fine. The lights were bright and people were always around, even at midnight, and the cops made their presence known. But Main Street added 10 minutes to my walk home, and after bartending for 7 hours, my legs would feel like bricks. 10 minutes was 10 minutes too long for me. The alley was narrow and crooked, tucked between 2 old brick apartment buildings and a row of boarded up shops. Half the bulbs in the rusted fixtures overhead had long since blown, leaving these big gaps of shadow. The pavement was cracked and littered with broken glass, old beer cans, and the kind of trash that told you nobody really gave a damn about this part of town. It always smelled like piss and rotting garbage, but I was used to it. After enough nights dragging myself home at 2 in the morning, this place became routine for me. On this night in particular, though, something was different. It was a Tuesday in late August, humid as hell. The bar hadn't really been busy, but I stayed late, cleaning up because the other bartender had bailed early. By the time I locked up, the streets were dead quiet. Even Main Street was empty except for a couple of taxis cruising slowly. The city had that strange hollow silence that made everything feel like I was walking through a stage set after the actors had already gone home. I crossed the corner and slipped into the alley, my sneakers crunching over the gravel, the sound bouncing back at me off the walls. I told myself it's the same as always, dark, empty, and harmless. But halfway through, I couldn't shake the sense that I was no longer alone. You know that feeling, when every hair on your arm rises and your body knows something that your brain just doesn't know yet? That's what hit me. My pulse jumped, and without meaning to, I glanced over my shoulder. Nothing, just darkness stretching back to the street that I'd already left behind. I picked up my pace and my backpack jostled against my shoulder blades. And then, faintly, but there, nonetheless, the scrape of a shoe on concrete, somewhere behind me. The sound came again, quick and sharp, like somebody adjusting their stride to match mine. My stomach dropped. I forced myself not to turn around. Turning meant eye contact, acknowledgement. Predators would thrive on that. Just keep walking, I told myself. Don't give them any kind of reason. The alley stretched ahead of me, the exit a rectangle of orange glow from the streetlight beyond it. It wasn't that far, maybe 50 yards, but in the half-dark with brick walls towering on either side, it felt like a tunnel, a goddamn trap. The footsteps behind me grew steadily, not rushed, not hesitant, just there, following. I broke. My walk snapped into a jog and I started booking it. My keys dug into my palm, wedged between my fingers like this shitty set of brass knuckles. The scrape of shoes answered me now, faster and closer. Whoever it was, they'd been waiting for me to pick up the pace.
Hey.
The voice was male, rough like a smoker. I didn't answer, my lungs were seizing up. Every instinct screamed to not engage.
Hey, I'm talking to you.
The words shot down the alley, bouncing off the walls, and my jog now turned into a sprint. The exit was right there, 30 yards, maybe less. I could see the traffic beyond it, the safety of lit streets. Then, he was ahead of me. I don't know how. 1 second the alley was empty, and the next his silhouette filled the exit, cutting me off. He was tall, broad shoulders, something glinting in his hands. My legs locked and I skidded and almost fell. My chest heaved as the sounds of footsteps behind me didn't stop either because there was more than one. Now, a laugh echoed, an overtly confident one. I spun around desperately, and the second man stepped out of the shadows that I'd just run past, blocking the way back. Thin and twitchy with eyes that darted like he smoked something cheap and dirty. He had a length of chain looped around his wrist, dangling to the ground. The one at the exit raised up his hand. The glint of a knife was long and rusty. My throat was now dried up and no words came out. "Wallet," the twitchy one said. "And your phone, toss them down." I reached slowly into my pocket and my hand shook so bad I almost dropped the phone before I could even pull it free. My other still gripped my keys like an idiot. The one with the knife noticed me. "Oh, that's cute. You planning to scratch me with those?" They both laughed. I tossed my phone, then my wallet. Total, utter defeat. "That's better," the chain man said. Then he stepped closer and started stooping for my stuff. And that's when I took the opportunity and ran. Straight at the one with the knife, and I don't think he really expected it. None of them did. I roared, every ounce of panic forcing me forward, and my shoulder slammed into his face. He grunted and stumbled back, and the knife clattered to the pavement. Pain exploded in my side. The chain whipped across my ribs, tearing into me. I still didn't stop though. I shoved that knife guy hard, sending him sprawling into the brick wall, then dove to the ground where the blade had landed. My fingers closed around the handle, slick with grime. I spun around, swinging wildly. The chain man leapt back, eyes wide. His smirk was no longer there. I slashed, the blade cutting the air inches from his chest, and he circled and cursed me. The one that I'd shoved into the wall was already pushing up, wheezing but furious. Blood was dripping from his mouth where his lip had split. His eyes were burning holes through me. "You're dead, you little shit," he said. I didn't answer him. There's no time. My only thought was clear. Fight like a cornered animal or die here, nameless in an alley that smelled like piss and garbage. The chain whistled again, and this time I ducked and lunged forward, drove that knife out in a blind thrust. I felt it connect, hot resistance, then give. The chain man screamed, dropping his weapon, clutching his arm where the blood was now gushing through his fingers. Again, I didn't think, I just bolted for the exit. The knife guy lunged at me, catching my backpack strap, and the world yanked sideways. I hit the ground hard, cheek scraping against the asphalt, and my grip on that knife had slipped. He landed on me, snarling, his breath rancid in my ear. His hands were now clawing for the blade. As I shoved upward, twisting my hands free to find his face, I jammed my thumb into his eye as hard as I could. His scream was raw and animalistic. His weight then shifted just enough for me to roll. My hand found that knife again, and I didn't hesitate. I drove it backward once, twice, until his grip now slackened. Then I was up, stumbling, drenched in sweat and blood. The chain man was hunched, still screaming, and the knife guy was writhing on the ground, clutching his side. I didn't wait another second to see if they'd follow. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, out into the street, into the flood of headlights and honking horns. People stared at me, but nobody stopped. The city swallowed their indifference like it always did. But I was alive, for now at least. I didn't stop running until my lungs were burning and my legs turned to rubber. I made it 3 blocks before I collapsed against a bus stop bench, heaving and sweat soaking through my shirt. My hands were sticky with blood, some mine, some of it not. The knife was gone. I must have dropped it somewhere in my sprint. People passed me. A couple slowed and glanced and then kept going. Nobody wanted to get involved with a bleeding kid at 2 a.m. I finally pulled my phone from my pocket, except it wasn't there. Right, I tossed it back in the alley. My fucking wallet too. The only thing I'd carried out of that hell was blood and a heartbeat that felt like it was about to explode. I stumbled into a gas station. The clerk froze when he saw me, hand hovering over the panic button, until I choked out, "Call the cops." The police came, more questions and reports, flashing lights painting the window red and blue. They drove me back to the alley, and by then my adrenaline had drained into a cold ache that left me shaking. The alley looked the same as it always did. Cracked pavement, trash bags split open, shadows swallowing up the corners. The only thing missing now was the men. No blood trails, no chain, no knife, just emptiness. You sure this is where it took place?" one of the officers asked me, his tone obviously skeptical. I nodded so hard that my neck was hurting. "Yeah, they were here, both of them. One had a chain, the other had a knife. My words tumbled frantic, but the officer's expression didn't change. They took my statement anyway, promised to keep an eye out, and I knew from the way they scribbled half-hearted notes that nothing was going to come of it. Back in my apartment, I scrubbed my hands raw. The sink water ran pink, then red, and finally clear. And when I looked up, the mirror showed somebody that I didn't really recognize. Eyes wide, face pale, jaw tight like I was still waiting for the knife to come back down. I didn't sleep very well that night. I really couldn't. Every creak in my building would make me jolt awake. Every gust of wind outside sounded like their footsteps. 2 days later, I saw a headline on the local news. "Body found in West Side Alley." That same area, same description. No name released. Police suspected some kind of gang violence. I didn't really need the name. I already knew. And, well, that's the last time I ever took that shortcut. Didn't matter how tired I was, how late I got off, or how heavy my feet felt. I stick to the main street now, bright lights, crowds, and cameras, because that alley isn't a shortcut. It's a grave waiting for you to step inside. And I came closer than I'll ever really want to admit to being another nameless kid who never made it home. I actually used to love working the late shift. There was just something about the quiet of 2 a.m, the way the world outside the diner seemed to almost fall asleep. It really made the grind just feel easier. Customers were fewer, mostly just truckers, drunks, the kind of night owls who nursed black coffee until dawn. By then, the place would smell like bacon grease and burnt toast, no matter how much cleaner we sprayed. The best part of the shift, though, was my smoke break. 10 minutes out by the dumpsters, leaning up against the bricks with a cigarette and silence. No clattering dishes, no waitresses gossiping by the register, no manager peering up over my shoulder. It's just me, the night, and the hiss of my lighter. The alley behind the diner wasn't pretty. A single flickering bulb cast weak lights over cracked asphalt. The dumpsters reeked of sour milk and fryer oil. Some nights raccoons would crawl out, bold enough to hiss at me while I smoked. Other nights it was rats scurrying in the shadows. Still, I preferred it to the noise inside. Out here, it felt like the world had just forgotten me. On this night in particular, I lit up and pulled my apron loose, stretching my back. It was humid, sticky, the kind of air that clung to your skin. I'd barely taken 2 drags when I took notice of him. At first, I really thought he was just some other homeless guy digging through the trash, a tall figure lingering near the far dumpster. His outline was faint in the bad light. His clothes were loose, maybe a jacket far too big for his frame. I couldn't see his face, but I could feel his eyes, fixated on me. I froze with my cigarette halfway up to my lips. Usually the homeless would avoid me, shuffling off without a word, but this man wasn't moving. He just stood there, leaning slightly, head cocked, watching me. Hey, I called out to him, voice firm. "You can't be back here, man." Nothing though, not even a twitch. Just these pale teeth flashing when he finally stepped forward, and something sharp glinting in his hand. His grin widened as he stepped into the light. His face was oily and unshaven. His hair was slicked back in greasy strands. The thing in his hand wasn't a knife, at least not exactly. It looked like a sharpened screwdriver, duct tape wrapped around the handle. My cigarette fell from my fingers. I backed up and reached for the steel door that led to the kitchen. My hand brushed against the metal, but the latch had locked behind me. I need my keys, and they were still inside my apron pocket, inside the damn diner. The man's shoes scuffed closer, almost like he was enjoying this. "Look, I don't have any cash," I said. "Whatever you want, just..." He didn't answer me. He just kept coming forward, head tilted, grin nailed on his face. The screwdriver caught the light again and my chest tightened. I darted left toward the row of dumpsters. The alley would narrow there, ending in a chain link fence with a gate that usually stuck halfway closed, if I could squeeze through. The man then lunged at me. I stumbled and slammed into a dumpster hard enough to rattle the lid. The reek of spoiled food hit my nose as I shoved past, scraping my arm on rusted metal. Behind me, his footsteps had picked up, quick and heavy, far too close. The gate loomed open, just like I'd hoped it to be. I dropped low and forced my body through the narrow gap. The chain link shredded my sleeve, skin tearing as I clawed forward, and I felt his hand brush up against my leg, fingernails scraping denim. I burst out onto the narrow service lane that ran behind the diner. My lungs seized. I bolted, my sneakers slapping against the asphalt. But he was fast, far too fast. His steps were slamming closer every second, echoing off the brick walls around me. I veered right, heart slamming up against my ribs. Ahead, another steel service door stood ajar. Somebody must have left it open for trash runs, and I dove inside. The storage hall was dim, lined with metal shelves stacked with flour bags and canned goods. My breath was now tearing out in ragged gasps. I sprinted down the road, hoping to loop around and slip into the diner unnoticed. But the door behind me creaked, and I heard the hinges whine.
Come out.
His voice finally rasped, crooked and broken like he hadn't even spoken in years.
Don't make it worse.
I crouched low and pressed up against a shelf, my knees now trembling. The screwdriver scraped against metal as he dragged it along the racks, each screech louder than the last. I couldn't stay still though. I forced myself to crawl, keeping low, weaving through the boxes of styrofoam cups and cartons of ketchup packets. And then I heard footsteps ahead of me. He cut me off. I spun back, but he was there too, slipping between the shelves like he'd almost been here before, like he knew the place better than I did. My panic surged. My hand shot out and grabbed the nearest thing that I could find, a glass bottle of hot sauce, and when he lunged, I swung. The bottle shattered up against his cheek, spraying red across his face. He screamed, clutching his eye, and the screwdriver clattered below. I didn't have time to think. I shoved him hard and ran. His body then slammed up against the shelves, metal rattling, boxes toppling. I bolted through the hall, past the prep station, bursting out into the kitchen diner. Grease popped on the stove. The cook spun around, wide-eyed. Jesus, what the fuck? Before I could answer, the man then barreled through the doorway, blood running down his cheek, screwdriver now back in his hand. The cook grabbed the first thing within reach, a cast iron skillet, and swung it like a bat. The crack was sickening. The man's head snapped sideways and his body collapsed in a heap on the linoleum. Silence, just the hiss of the fryer and my own ragged breaths. I stared at the man's body, chest heaving. The grin was gone, and his teeth were red. "Call the cops," I whispered to him. The cook just nodded at me and fumbled for the phone. A few seconds had now passed, and when I looked down again, the man wasn't there. I heard the door to the alley banging open and then swinging on its hinge. The night air then rolled in, and the cook cursed and dropped the phone. We both rushed out back, and the alley was empty. It's the dumpsters and the shadows. The police showed up 10 minutes later, but by then, I was sitting on a milk crate out back, chain smoking like my lungs didn't even matter anymore. My hands were still shaking, and every time that steel door creaked, my stomach would flip, like I thought he was coming back in. The officers searched the alley, and of course nothing. No man, no blood trail, just that broken hot sauce bottle in my shredded up sleeve. The cook swore up and down that he'd hit the guy with the skillet, that he felt bone give when it connected. They nodded and jotted a few notes, promised to file a report. But their eyes said the same thing that they were probably thinking. "We don't believe you." One officer muttered to us, "It's probably just some tweaker. They tend to scatter when they hear sirens, you know?" I wanted to scream. Nobody moves like that. Nobody takes a skillet to the skull like that and then just gets up and walks away, then disappears. For weeks after this event, I didn't step out back for a smoke. Every night I thought I felt those eyes again, that head cocked and that grin far too wide. Every time I locked the dumpster gate, I half expected him to be waiting on the other side. One morning, the diner's small TV was tuned to the local news, and I almost dropped my tray when his face filled the screen.
Authorities are are searching for this man, wanted in connection with multiple assaults in the county. Witnesses describe his weapon of choice as a sharpened screwdriver.
The grainy photo on screen was the same face that I'd seen grinning at me behind the dumpster. Oily hair, hollow cheeks. The news said that he'd been living off-grid, drifting from town to town, attacking women behind bars, diners, laundromats. All the same setup, late at night when nobody was looking. I stood there frozen, coffee pot in hand, listening as the anchor added,
Police believe he may still be in the area. Citizens are urged to use caution.
That was 2 years ago, and to my knowledge, they never caught him, and his face faded from the news cycle, replaced by newer stories, fresher crimes. But every single time I walk home at night, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder still. And still to this day, every time when I take the trash out, my hand will shake when I grab the back door latch. I cut the engine and let the van tick quiet. Midnight air is heavy, pressing in through the cracked window. Dumpsters line up in the alley, the smell of rot and grease seeping inside. I tilt my seat back, just 10 minutes. 10 minutes shut-eye before the next run. Phone alarm set, hat low, eyes closed. Then I hear a scraping sound. My eyes snap open. A heart kicks hard. Another scrape, another thud, heavy and final, like something hitting the pavement. I sit up and grip the wheel. My headlights catch two men at the mouth of the alley. They're dragging a carpet, long and heavy. The ends wrapped up in duct tape. It bends in the middle, too much weight for anything but a body. My throat closes. One man adjusts his grip, the other turns. His face lifts, eyes catching mine through the windshield. He freezes and his head tilts. Recognition. The carpet drops and both men are now looking at me. They start walking toward the van. Keys twist, engine coughs and dies. Fuck. They're coming closer now. One swings a pipe in his hand, the other got something shorter and sharper. I twist again and the engine roars. Relief floods and I'm gone in a snap and slam that gear in a drive. The tall one's hand clamps the door handle and yanks hard. It's locked. He smashes the glass with a pipe and the van shakes. I floor it. My tires are screaming, rubber burning. His hand slips off, and the short one pounds on the side, fist thundering like gunshots. I lurch out of the alley, boxes tumbling behind me. My eyes are wide and my hands are locked on the wheel. A crash ensues. Metal explodes across the street. I clip some trash bins. My van slows, a little too slow. Then I hear my side door slide. He's in. An arm reaches and grabs a package and hurls it out, and his fingers claw for me next. I swerve really hard and the van fishtails. His grip then rips loose. He stumbles, curses, and fades off in the mirror. I don't think twice, I gun it. Another alley ahead. I swing in and it's narrow, tighter, walls closing in, headlights bouncing over the graffiti and broken glass. It's a fucking dead end, a fence with no way out. I slam my brakes and the van skids sideways. I turn the lights off quickly, duck low, and hold my breath. Footsteps echo off in the dark, slow and confident. Pipe scrapes against the brick. Screeches fill the alley, and it crawls up my spine. I glance, and my only chance is that gap between the dumpsters, and the side door is cracked open. I grab my phone, push it in my pocket, and throw open the passenger door, which creaks far too loud. I hear them sprinting. I dive and squeeze through the metal, tearing my arm open. Heat and blood. I don't stop. Push the door and it gives. I'm inside. A hallway swallows me, dark air thick with mold. My shoes slap against the concrete, every step echoing. Then their voices pour in behind me. I sprint blind, crash into a wall, and my shoulder starts screaming, but I keep running. A stairwell up, legs pump fire. Every floor the same, peeling paint, busted lights, trash crunching under my feet. The footsteps slam the stairs below me. Pipe bangs against the rail.
You shouldn't have seen that.
Certain death ahead. Room ahead. I dive in. Drop low behind a couch split open with springs. My breath rattles. My sweat drips. Silence, then creak of the floorboards. They're here. Bottle under my knee rolls, clinking across the tile. Shit. The knob twists, and I explode through the wall. Rotten wood splinters. Plaster rains down. I tumble into another hallway, coughing dust. Pain lights up my arm, but I'm moving. Stairs again, down this time, 2 at a time. Chest tearing open, lungs clawing up for air. There's an exit sign ahead, glowing red and buzzing. I slam through the door. Street, light, cars rolling by. I stumble out into the open, blood streaking my arm. My chest is heaving, my knees are ready to buckle. People stare, some stop, none move. I spin. Doorway is empty, just dark, just still. The cops come later, flashing lights, yellow tape, questions that cut deeper than the wounds on my arm. I point to the alley, the carpet, the men. They search and nothing, just trash bags and flies. I tell them about the building. They check, condemned, empty, no footprints but mine. They look at me like I'm crazy. Long night, one says, scribbles it down. But I know the way to that carpet, the way it bent, the eyes finding me through the glass, that voice, calm as death. Weeks later, on the news, body found outside town, carpet, duct tape. They called it gang violence, retaliation, neat little box to put it in. But I was there, I heard it.
You shouldn't have seen that.
And I'll hear those words every time I park in that alley for the rest of my life. This happened around 2010 when I was still a kid. We lived in a small house surrounded by trees, a place that felt tucked away but was only a few minutes from town. It was me, my mom, my dad, my cousin, my aunt, and her husband all under the same roof. Most of the days were pretty ordinary. My cousin and I were usually watched by my mom while everybody else went to work. The air always smelled like pine and deer would wander through the yard pretty much daily. The three of us spent a lot of time in the house alone. The kind of home that seemed peaceful by day and a little eerie by night. We had only one neighbor, an older man who mostly kept to himself, and at that age, I didn't think twice about being isolated. It was just a normal life. Bugs, animals, big storms. It was all routine. The strange thing about what happened that day is that everybody remembers it clearly, yet none of us remember it the same way. In my version, my mom was doing my hair. She loved to braid it every morning. I was wearing a plain white t-shirt, sitting still while she worked her fingers through my hair when everything in the room suddenly goes red. At first, I assumed I was imagining it, but the light got stronger until it filled every corner. I remember the walls glowing, the floorboards picking up the color like blood-tinted glass. It wasn't a sunset, way too fast and bright. I looked up from my lap and the whole world felt slow, as if time itself had paused, and I couldn't even hear my heartbeat. The windows in front of me were uncovered. The light came straight through them, thick and steady, almost humming in a way that I could feel in my teeth. I glanced up toward my mom, expecting her to move, but she was frozen, mid-gesture, eyes wide. My cousin had backed into the far corner of the room and was staring toward the ceiling. For a moment, I really thought everything outside must be burning, but there was no smoke. The air didn't even feel warm. It was just red, pure red, with no shadows, no shapes, and no sounds. Then it vanished. One blink, it's there. Next, it's gone. Time seemed to slam back to normal speed. The sound of the clock returned, and I could hear birds again. I remember standing there shaking and asked my mom what that was. She stared at the window for a few moments before finally saying that she didn't know. Her version doesn't match mine. She said that she wasn't doing my hair at all. She'd been helping me with homework at the table when the red light came in. She swore that she grabbed both me and my cousin and hid in the corner, holding on until it faded completely. She remembers being certain that something was outside, though she never saw what it was. We've compared memories dozens of times now, and she insists that her story is true. I'm just as sure about mine. My cousin, however, never really likes to talk about it, and when he does, it's short and very uneasy. He says the light had weight to it, that it pressed down on him, but he kind of clams up after that. He never told us which version that he remembers, or if he remembers something different entirely. As the years pass on, the event never really leaves us. Sometimes we'll laugh about it, saying we were abducted, came back with different memories, but when I mention it now, my mom will still tense up. She hates red light too, can't stand it. If I use red light therapy or even a red night lamp, she gets anxious, will tell me to turn it off. A few years ago, I actually stumbled across a local article online about people seeing these strange lights in that same area around the same time. Some would claim it's a UFO sighting, and we ended up moving away long before, but reading that still made my stomach drop. Now personally, I never saw a craft, I never saw any figures, never even heard a sound. All I know is that time felt thin, the air felt heavy, and the world went red. Strangest experience of my life for sure. I still wonder what happened that day, and I guess I'll never really understand it completely. Something that brushed against us for a second then slipped away, leaving only a partial memory in its wake. I used to live in a suburban neighborhood inside Tennessee. When you grow up in a place like this, you learn early that the forests aren't for playing. The woods just don't play in the South. My sister and I were strictly told to never go in the forest alone. I moved away when I was 8, and this happened right around that time. My friend had come over for a play date. We were hanging out in my backyard. Now, the yard is kind of strange. It sloped down sharply and ended right at the edge of the huge forest. That mattered because once you go down the hill, you couldn't really hear anybody on the deck unless they were yelling. There was this open tree line that led to a narrow trail winding deep into the woods. Being young and dumb, we thought it'd be fun to explore it. I didn't feel like running all the way back up the hill to tell my parents where we were going, so I didn't. We just kind of went. At first, everything was fine. We played around, threw some sticks, had some laughs, but when we started heading back towards my house, I heard something. Footsteps or branches snapping nearby. It felt like danger. I got this heavy feeling in my stomach like something or someone was watching us. My friend didn't say anything, but she didn't argue when I said that we should hurry back. Just as we reached the edge of the forest, I hear my mom's voice. She was calling for me somewhere off in the trees, saying that she was hurt, needed my help. That froze me. It was definitely her voice, same tone, same southern end. It just didn't make any sense. That danger feeling grew and grew. My head was telling me, go help her, but my gut was screaming to run. I took a few steps toward the voice before my friend grabbed my arm, and in that moment, the quote-unquote spell broke. My heart slammed in my chest, and my friend was pointing back up toward the deck. When I looked up, there was my mother, standing there waving, holding out popsicles. I could barely hear her calling out to us, but my friend had seen her walk outside. So we bolted up the hill as fast as we could. When we reached the porch, I asked my mom if she'd been in the woods. She frowned and said no, she'd been napping inside, woke up with this weird feeling that she needed to check on us. I never told her about the voice in the trees. I think she already knew that something was wrong, and I didn't really want to worry her anymore. That night after she tucked me in, I remember lying there in bed, staring out the window toward that same tree line. The moonlight was soft enough that I could see the shapes of the woods, the black outlines of branches shifting off in the wind. At first, all very normal. But then something else moved. A darker shape slid between the trees, almost like liquid. It paused, then turned as if it knew I was watching it. I ducked under the covers, trying to convince myself it was just my imagination. And after that, I stopped sleeping with the blinds open. Even during the day, the woods around me would make me uneasy. Sometimes I'd catch flashes of something pale moving between the trees or hear what sounded like breathing outside my window. A few weeks later, before we moved, my mom mentioned finding these claw marks on the back door. Thin, deep scratches just below the handle, like somebody had been testing how to get inside. She said it was probably raccoons. Fair warning to anybody visiting, stay out of the woods. I know the locals know exactly what I'm talking about. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, I learned what it meant to be alone in a house that suddenly didn't really feel like ours. I'm gonna be honest, I don't tell this story very much. My little sister Kinsley and I both came down with chickenpox that week. We were blotched, itchy, half mad from trying not to scratch anything. Kinsley made sure that we stuck together, pressing her face against mine, making me play dolls and tag even when she was burning up. A day later, I was covered head to toe. She was thrilled. Mom was too. She said it'd be easier if we both just kind of got it out of the way at the same time. My mom did what most moms did there in the 90s: oatmeal baths, calamine lotion, lukewarm ginger ale, along with some VHS tapes stacked on the coffee table. She had to work, same as Dad, and our timing really couldn't have been worse. My dad would leave before dawn. My mom hung on long enough to make us some toast, measure the antihistamine, and tape the emergency numbers to the fridge. She kissed Kinsley on the forehead, looked at me and said, "You're old enough to keep an eye on things." I believed her. 11 felt old, ancient. I was a man. By God, I had just been put in charge too, for real this time, and for the first time in my life. Sure, watching the house here and there for 30 minutes, no big deal, but getting to run the whole show all day with my sister to boot, it felt like I was just elected president. The house was quiet after she left, the heater ticking, pipes knocking, and the fridge giving its low moan every few minutes. Normal house sounds, safe and familiar to my ears. Kinsley and I built a fort out of blankets, watched cartoons until noon. We called it Fort Chickipaki. Crawling around inside the blankets and fabrics was a good way to itch our skin too, without actually scratching with our fingernails. We fought about which tape to play next, and she ended up picking Ferngully. I booed for a straight 5 minutes. The itching would come in waves, sharp little reminders that we were diseased but free. I liked it though, being out of school, having the house to ourselves. But I caved in, watched the movie anyway with her. Every now and again, I caught her reflections in the dark TV screen, 2 little speckled goblins, half-dressed and scabbed up, laughing and just making it through. It felt like a small vacation, just with a few rules. Stay put, don't scratch, answer the phone if it's Mom, and of course, lock the door. I remember how proud I actually felt locking the front door. By mid-morning, the light through the curtains had turned gold. The air in the house smelled like oatmeal and rubbing alcohol. Kinsley was humming to herself on the couch, tapping her legs, restless already. I thought the day would drag on like any other sick day, long, boring, and harmless. I didn't know the house could actually change sides though, and I didn't know family could too. The morning felt normal. Mom called around 9 to check in. I told her we were fine. She said that she'd grab some soup on lunch break, maybe even come home early. I told her not to worry. Big man words. Kinsley still sat there glued to the TV while I ended up taking a shower. My skin burned from the soap, but at least it quieted the itching a little bit. The water beat on the tile, steady and safe, and when I shut it off, the house was dead silent around me. I called out but didn't get an answer. I got dressed and walked into the hallway, and that's when I saw her leaning over the couch, face pressed up against the window. "What are you doing?" I asked her. She didn't move. "Uncle Dwayne's here." It caught me off guard. Dad's brother, always half drunk, sometimes mean and always unpredictable. I came to her side and looked for myself. His old truck sat at an angle in the driveway. Dwayne stomped through the yard in his denim jacket, pulling in boxes near the garage. He lifted a gas can, a bundle of cords, and tossed him into the truck bed. "It looks like he's just borrowing something," I said. I watched him wander, searching for whatever it might be. Sometimes he came to borrow tools or materials, whatever, so I really thought that's just what this was, one of those visits. And then he turned toward the house. "Duck," I whispered, and we dropped behind the couch. His boots then crunched their way toward the house, and the porch steps creaked. The screen door opened, then the deadbolt clicked. He had a key though. The front door closed behind him, and the sound was soft but final. I grabbed Kinsley's hand and whispered that we needed to go upstairs. We moved fast, skipping every noisy step into her room, and I locked that flimsy knob. Downstairs, it was silence again. The fridge door opened, a hiss of a beer can. He was inside, comfortable, like he was right at home. Kinsley trembled next to me. "Why is he here?" I didn't know. I crouched by the floor vent and just continued to listen. I heard him move through the living room, grabbing tapes, shoving things into a grocery sack. He wasn't looking for tools, he was just straight up taking stuff for himself. I mouthed that he was stealing. We waited and the TV came on. Then another can cracked open. He was settling in. I wanted to just wait it out, but time stretched and we were itchy. Finally, the TV went quiet. No footsteps, just the hum of the fridge. I whispered at Kinsley to stay here, and I slipped out, but Kinsley followed anyway. The house now smelled like beer and sweat. I stepped around this overturned chair, heart pounding so loud that I could feel it in my teeth. The kitchen in front of me was wrecked, drawers open, fridge ransacked. The living room was too, but no Uncle Dwayne. Then I heard a low laugh from down the hall in my parents' room. I crept forward and peeked around the doorframe. He stood by my mom's dresser, a hand buried in her underwear drawer. He lifted a pair and sniffed them, pocketed them, and chuckled again. I gasped out loud and it gave myself away. He spun around, eyes red and wet. "The hell are you doing here?" And for a second, we just stared at one another. And then he came for us. The beer can flew first, hitting the door and bursting. Foam sprayed across the carpet. "Come here, you little freaks." I pulled Kinsley down the hall. He followed, crashing into walls, knocking down pictures. "You spying on me?" We tore through the kitchen, socks slipping on linoleum. He grabbed at my shirt, missed only by inches. His breath hit me from the back of my neck, sour and rank. Uncle Dwayne always had really bad teeth, and I could smell the rot as he continued to chase me. I told Kinsley to run, and we cut through the dining room, looped around the table, and sprinted for the stairs, but he was too fast. I yanked Kinsley toward the back door instead. He slammed into the counter behind us, shouting, "I'll kill you!" The back door stuck. I twisted the lock and threw my shoulder into it. It burst open and cool morning air washed over us. We flew off the porch and down into the yard, and I heard him hit the door frame behind us, turning it into splinter on impact. I remember thinking I was being chased by a zombie. We sprinted for the fence. Ground tore underneath my feet. My hands hit the top board and we slipped. He was right behind me, shouting nothing but threats and curses. I pushed Kinsley up and over, and she stumbled and tumbled to the other side. I swung a leg up, and his hand caught my ankle. I yelled at him to let go, kicked, wild and desperately. My heel ended up hitting something soft. He grunted and then fell back. I rolled over the fence and hit dirt. The world went quiet except for Kinsley sobbing. Then a voice behind us. "Hey, what's going on over there?" Mr. Ellison, our next door neighbor. He was in his yard holding up a rake. "Help!" I shouted to him. "He's in our house." Dwayne came around the side of the fence on the road, staggering, red-faced, veins sticking out like pipework. Mr. Ellison dropped the rake and stepped forward. "You better get the hell out of here, Dwayne. I'm calling the cops." For a second, nobody moved. Then Dwayne started yelling again, throwing things, rocks, a plastic chair, anything he could get his hands on. "Go inside, kids," Mr. Ellison said. "Now." He turned back to Dwayne. "I got a gun." That did stop him. For a moment, he just stood there and glared, chest heaving. Then he spat on the grass and growled, "Tell my brother I came back for my money." He stomped over to his truck, slammed the door, and peeled away. I stood there shaking, lungs screaming. My arm still itched. My skin was crawling under the scabs. Kinsley clung to me, crying hard enough to hiccup. When I looked down at us, we were dirty, covered in chickenpox, and it honestly made me cry too. Mr. Ellison called the police from his porch, and I could still smell Dwayne in the air. Beer, motor oil, and just gross decay. I looked back at the house. The open door swung in the wind, slow and tired. There would be no fixing it, that was obvious. I remember looking at it and being scared of what my dad would say, even though I didn't do it. Still, they put me in charge, and from where I was standing, I'd failed. That was the first time that I understood that adults, that people, were the real monsters. The rest of that afternoon is still pretty blurry, but some parts burned clear as fire. The police came, Mr. Ellison had them on the phone before Dwayne even cleared the street. 2 cruisers showed up, sirens off, lights off. It made me think that they didn't even believe this was important.
One cop took Kinsley and me onto a porch while the other went inside with his hands on his gun. The house was destroyed, beer cans everywhere, drawers dumped, couch cushions gutted. My mom's dresser was overturned. It smelled like stale cigarettes and sweat. And I remember the cop shining his flashlight on the floor, licking his tongue and saying, "Jesus Christ." "All right, kids, how long was he inside for?" the other officer asked. I don't know, maybe 10 minutes, I responded. My mom got there maybe 40 minutes later, hair standing on end, still in her work uniform. Dad wasn't far behind. They ran straight to us. Mom hugged us so hard that it hurt, and Kinsley finally broke down for real this time, like ugly sobs. I remember my mom whispering that, "You're okay, baby, you're okay." I told them about everything, and so did Kinsley, through hiccups and tears. The words would come out in bursts. The shower, the truck, the beer, the screaming. Dad didn't say a thing until the cop asked if he wanted to press charges against his brother. Then his jaw locked up. The next few days kind of just dragged on. The police would come back twice. One took fingerprints off the dresser and the kitchen counter. Another asked us to tell them the story again and again. Each time it felt more distant, like it happened to somebody else. They found Dwayne's truck 2 towns over that night, parked behind a bar. He was passed out inside, still half drunk and half coherent. He spent a week in jail, got probation, and then had to go to some kind of counseling, nothing serious. And after that, we never saw him again. My mom changed the locks the same week. Dad put motion lights up on the porch and put up this heavy-duty security door. They argued in whispers every single night. And one time I heard Dad say that, "I told you he'd snap one day." My mom just cried. Kinsley wouldn't sleep alone for a month. Every creak would make her jump. I tried to act tough, but I'd wake up sweating myself, convinced that I heard his shoes or boots on the stairs again. I'd walk the hall at night, stare out that same window where she'd first seen him, and sometimes I'd imagine his truck parked there once more, tailgate down, his shadow moving amongst the trees. Now, Dwayne never came back, but that feeling never left. Even years later, when I was old enough to understand addiction and anger and how men like Dwayne rot from the inside out, I still can't shake what it felt like. The sound of him crossing our porch, the clicking of the door, the moment our house stopped being ours. It's funny how quick safety really will disappear. One second you're a kid in pajamas, eating toast and watching cartoons. The next, you're crouched behind a couch, realizing that the world cares little for you. In fact, it might not even know you exist at all. My mom mentioned to me once that Dwayne had moved out of state, somewhere near the border. She said he sobered up and he called to apologize years later, but she didn't put him on speaker and we never spoke. I don't know if it would have helped anything anyway. I'm 40-something now, married, 2 kids of my own, and I still double check the locks every night, still keep a bat behind the bedroom door, and I tell my kids not to open up the door for anybody, not even family. They think I'm paranoid, and maybe I am. Back when I was about 6 or 7, we were visiting my aunt for Christmas. She had just divorced her husband. He was a hot-headed Czechoslovakian guy who had started to go a little off the deep end. He called the house multiple times over the past few days, threatening my aunt, but nothing had ever come from it. We'd kind of dealt with the temper and flare-ups the entire course of their relationship, so it wasn't really anything new. The only part that was difficult was that we were hearing him freak out through the phone, not in person. This was actually kind of nice compared to the normal routine. Try not to placate a middle-aged guy with a bad attitude. My parents and I had just immigrated to Canada, which is where the story was taking place, so we were spending the night at my aunt's before the house was ready. We were lounging for the holidays and just enjoying a little family time. There was hot cocoa, caramel popcorn, all the fixings for a good time. While my aunt was sitting in the den, she happened to glance up and saw her ex coming towards the house with a hunting rifle. She screamed to my dad with balls of steel flew into action, locking the door and then running myself, my aunt, and my mother up the stairs, and then locking us in a room. We put a dresser in front of the door while my dad grabbed a buck knife and then ran back downstairs. I was in shock watching him grab a weapon and go back toward the danger. He was totally calm, ready to deliver certain death to this clown who thought he was going to surprise us. I learned in those few seconds, watching my father gather himself and then go downstairs, never to mess with that man. Never. Not even as a joke. The rest of the story I only know because it's been told to me. Basically, my mom called the police from the upstairs phone. Meanwhile, my aunt's ex busted open the door near where my dad was hiding and then entered the home. My dad waited for him to take a few steps into the main room before he jumped out from the corner and hit him over the head with something. I think my dad thought it would knock the guy out cold, but all it ended up doing was getting him to drop the rifle. This wasn't a bad alternative. My dad continued the assault, which kind of turned into a raw fist fight there in the foyer. I don't know what happened to the knife. I assumed it was involved at least in the initial back and forth scuffle, but he never confirmed nor denied if he stabbed that guy. With the look that my dad had on his face that day, I'm almost positive he knifed him at least once. The police showed up and arrested my aunt's ex. But the scariest part about all this was, my aunt's ex's father was found hiding in the backyard when the police did a sweep about the house. He was this old abusive drunk that hated my aunt too. He'd been waiting in the backyard with a knife, hoping we'd run out there. He was way scarier than his son. He had a real rap sheet of aggravated assaults and more things like that. Had my father tried to usher us out back, we would have been dead in that moment. He really saved us that day with his quick thinking and quicker action. Situational awareness is one thing, but having the brass to react is definitely something else. The father ended up getting deported. The ex went to jail and then had a restraining order for years to come. Although he still claims they only wanted to scare us, it was a horrifying experience, hearing all that commotion from downstairs while we were all hidden away. All I know is, based on my dad's bravery and the beating he must have put on that guy, we've gotten to enjoy many more Christmases.
On the 25th of December in 2014, 36-year-old Dustin Lee Klopp dialed 911 from his home in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. When they asked what the nature of his emergency was, Dustin told the dispatcher that he required police assistance as a domestic disturbance had occurred at his home. He refused to elaborate any further, and when assured that the officers had been dispatched to his location, Dustin hung up the phone. Upon their arrival at Dustin's home, the police officers received no answer after knocking on his front door. The scenes of domestic disputes are often extremely noisy and extremely volatile, but in this case, there was nothing but a dead silence on the other side of the door. The officers began circling the perimeter of the house, peering into the windows before making their way into the backyard. The place seemed completely deserted, and for a moment, the officers believed they may have gotten to the wrong address. Just as they were about to radio dispatch for some more clarification, one of the officers passed a small shed Dustin had kept in his backyard and detected the telltale smell of rotten flesh emanating from its interior. After fetching a pair of bolt cutters from their patrol car, the officers gained access to the shed, and after a brief search, discovered a dismembered human corpse stuffed into a gym bag. It was quickly determined the deceased was Stephanie Kilhefner, the common-law wife of Dustin Lee Klopp, and soon after, the police officers came to a horrifying conclusion. Dustin had absconded with the couple's two daughters, and if he'd murdered their mother, there was no telling what he had planned for them. Local law enforcement rushed into action, setting up roadblocks while requesting additional units from neighboring counties. Within just a half an hour, a gigantic web of roadblocks and police patrols sought to trap Dustin in Lancaster County, but the effort proved fruitless. Because right around the same time, the entire county was being sealed off. Dustin simply walked into a state police barracks and handed himself in. "My name is Dustin Lee Klopp," he told the officers at the front desk, "and I just killed my wife." As they escorted him into an interview room, homicide detectives were struck by how calm Dustin was and how he remained that way as he described the events of the previous night. At around 10 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Dustin and his wife began to argue. Their relationship had already been steadily unraveling, but the copious amounts of alcohol exacerbated an already tense situation until the atmosphere became downright volatile. Dustin explained how his wife had started to fiercely berate him after he attempted to walk away from the argument. Stephanie then directed so many vile insults at Dustin, he claimed to simply snap.
He saw red and attacked her. With one single strike, Dustin knocked Stephanie unconscious, and as she lay before him groaning, she gradually came around. But he knew there was no turning back now. Stephanie would use this incident to financially and socially destroy him. She'd take the kids, she'd take the house, and she'd take almost half of his salary for as long as he continued to hold the job. This drunken mistake would prove nothing short of catastrophic for him, unless he committed the unthinkable. At that, Dustin walked into the family's kitchen, retrieved the sharpest knife that he could find. He kneeled next to his wife's body, brought the blade up to her throat, sliced open her jugular in a spray of fresh blood. He then walked into his home's backyard, grabbed a large axe he'd been using to chop wood for a smoker, then, in his own words, split her head open with it. He spent the remainder of the evening chopping up Stephanie's body, all while their 2 sleeping daughters slept peacefully upstairs, completely ignorant of the horror that had unfolded downstairs. By morning, Dustin had removed almost all evidence of the crime, all except his wife's corpse. After stuffing her remains into the gym bag and hiding it in the shed, he hoped the cold might mask the stench of death. He then drove his children over to his parents' house under the pretense of spending Christmas at their place. To them, it was a pleasant surprise, and neither party thought too much of it as Dustin drove back to home to place that fateful phone call. Overcome with guilt, Dustin briefly considered suicide. The idea of facing the media firestorm that would inevitably follow seemed far too much to bear. But instead of taking his own life, Dustin decided to face judgment. His courage only lasted a few months though, as in early 2015, Dustin hung himself in his cell at Lancaster County Prison. His attempt was interrupted by a prison guard, but the intervention came far too late. He was declared clinically brain dead just a week later, slipping away shortly after life support was withdrawn. Crimes like this are a prime example of why restraint and de-escalation are so important. When Dustin lost his temper with his wife, he not only lost the moral high ground, he kicked off a chain of events that would end in both of their deaths. At a time when families should be coming together, putting aside their differences to spend quality time together, Dustin Lee Klopp chose to doom his own. I was driving from Cheyenne up to Butte, Montana, and the first part is generally windy with chances of the road closing due to the wind being common. I was about half a mile behind a pickup truck, pulling a travel trailer, when I saw that it started to get loose. I myself regularly pulled a 28-foot travel trailer myself, and had spent a few days and nights sitting in Douglas, Wyoming, waiting for the winds to die down so I could finish my drive. When I say winds, I mean catastrophic air movements, sometimes upward of 75 miles per hour. The southern belt of Wyoming can actually be a record setter for winds. The average is usually over 50 miles per hour for the year. Casper held the highest rate of suicide per capita in the world, and there's barely 60,000 people living there. Many attribute this to the wind driving them crazy, day after day. Anyway, I start mumbling to myself about using the trailer brakes to straighten it out, when he went sideways and into the center of the divided highway. It jackknifed and rolled, so I yelled some curses. I was a brand new dad at the time, so I'd been thinking extra about my own mortality. There's nothing like someone else on the road, not just putting themselves at risk, but everyone else around them too. I'm a former EMT, so I was preparing myself to help save some guy's life when I rounded the corner and saw it. The truck was on its side. He had landed on the driver's head partially detached outside of the vehicle, with his body inside and a small section of ligament keeping it attached. Basically, his head smashed through the driver's window of this truck as it rolled, and then the truck decapitated him as it shifted on its side along the roadway. I could see a path of blood where the open wounds had dug through the snow. At the end of this little bloody trail is a severed human head, still bleeding while the snow lands in its hair. I looked in the front window and saw no one else inside, and slowly walked back to my truck, mumbling about who knows what. I called law enforcement, explained the situation in the scene, and then the location. I asked if they needed me to stay, and dispatch told me no. My information was enough. I drove a long way in silence. I even cried some thinking about my 8-month-old boy, and what his life would be like without me. I saw myself driving that truck and hauling that trailer, as that's how my wife and I lived for about 8 years. We pulled that thing all over, rain or shine, any time of the year. Count your blessings. First off, I'm living very rural, in a small village with maybe 10 to 15 houses, but close to the highway. You can drive there within maybe 5 minutes. It's also about 10 minutes away from town. If you cross the street, it just takes you about a 10-minute walk to reach the forest. First Christmas Day, in the afternoon, my partner and I decided to go for a little digestive walk. We were really stuffed from all the food. It was around 5 p.m. and already dark when we left. We had this big and bright LED flashlight with us, and I also took my camera and my flash, as I love taking pictures of nature at night. We decided to walk on a little country road towards the forest, and then turn right, following a small gravel cycle track close to the forest border, which connects our village and the next. In the middle part of the track, you have to walk through a small bit of forest. It's rather dark and the trees are very high and quite dense. When we entered, I saw my flashlight reflecting on something and recognized a car being parked there on the side of the track, close to the trees. This struck me as odd. Cars are not allowed to drive there, and the path is very narrow and hidden, so I was a bit cautious. My partner pointed the light inside of the car, and it seemed to be empty. I also noticed that the windows were frozen, so it must have been parked there for quite some time. A bit in front of the car, I spotted a tree with this intriguing structure. I asked my partner to point the flashlight toward it, so I could better focus and photograph it with my flash. After I took a few images, my partner told me, there's someone standing behind us in the middle of the road. He's looking at us. Nobody was following us that whole way until now. I looked behind me occasionally, because at this time in the evening and so close to the border of the forest, there's sometimes boars. Indeed, now there was a man standing behind us, staying just out of the flashlight's reach. He wasn't saying anything, just standing there and facing us. At first, I thought he might be startled, as it may seem a bit weird if someone's just taking photos around your car. I decided to get up and confront him from a distance, explaining to him that I was just taking photos of that tree. He didn't react, he just stood there. I then went on to ask him if he needed some light, and he replied that that wasn't necessary. It was odd, but I was still calm. Sure, there has to be a normal explanation for all this behavior. Nonetheless, my partner and I just decided to get out of there and follow the path leading to the next village. I remembered the letters on his license plate and Googled it. It turned out he was from a city about 6 hours away from us. Mind you, the country that I live in is in a very strict lockdown right now, so you're only allowed to travel even by car if you have very urgent reasons. After we reached the first lantern in the next village, we looked back and observed the car driving a bit out of the forest, turning around and then going back inside. I was able to see that he parked there again and turned the lights off. He didn't leave the forest. We went home on a much longer way than initially intended, and I didn't want to go back there for obvious reasons. Our flashlight battery died on the way, and my phone battery was low, so I didn't want to call the police back then, but I called them as soon as I arrived home and gave them all the details that I can remember. I think I was very lucky to have my partner and that camera, as well as that bright light with me. I don't want to imagine what could have happened if I was all alone. About 5 years ago, my mom started dating a guy that she'd met on a dating site. The online dating is fine. I had recently started dating a woman who would later become my wife, and we'd met online as well. Both my girlfriend, who would later become my wife, and myself never liked this guy. We thought he was a weirdo literally from day one. We didn't think he was mean or anything like that, just creepy. He was quiet. He kept his eyes closed a lot, occasionally saying odd things, like offering my wife a chocolate, then popping one in his mouth and closing his eyes, then moaning as he let it melt in his mouth. It was all stuff that just teetered on inappropriate, but also kind of reminded me of special needs individuals I personally known as well in my life. I don't mean that in a disparaging way in the slightest, just in the sense that I wondered how much control this guy had over his thoughts and his words. One time my wife and I were visiting my mom, but she got called into work, so we waited at her house. Her boyfriend was over, and he spent the entire several hours that night just hanging out in her bedroom with the door closed. We could hear noises every now and again,
but for the most part, it sounded like he was just lying totally still in there. Really creeped us out because we didn't know what to do. We ended up just waiting it out, but maybe be a little bit more of a host next time. Just before Christmas, my mom and this guy start having some difficulties. My wife and I were visiting for the holidays. She dropped all of her problems on us, and we listened carefully, gave our opinions, and suggested that she might be better off without him. She had already made her mind up, though, and decided to break up with him on Christmas Eve. I couldn't help but smile. Of course, she'd been lying out this entire plan, down to the day of when to do it, and then explained it to us purely for confirmation. What I was smiling about was that she'd already lured us into the house for the holiday weekend. We're going to be stuck in the crossfire after she dumps this guy. All I can imagine is him quietly collecting his belongings before murdering us in our sleep. Thanks, Mom. We spent the night at my mom's and got up early on Christmas morning to visit my dad at his house. We didn't plan to spend the night at my dad's, but we got snowed in, which was actually a nice Christmas surprise. We had avoided the entire breakup conversation the night before, and then got out of there pretty much the moment the sun rise, and we were happy to be now stuck at my dad's. The next day we left as soon as we could, to get through the snow. My wife suggested that we stop by my mom's house on the way, make sure that she was okay. My wife just had a really bad feeling about that ex-boyfriend. I couldn't blame her. That whole weekend was like a perfect murder setup. It was a holiday weekend, fresh blankets of snow, family members coming and going, adding to the chaos. With my mom and that guy snowed in alone, the reality became more clear that there was potentially danger at hand. My mom's car was in the driveway, but that doesn't really mean much. She lives close enough to work that she actually walks often. She never locks her door, which drives me crazy, so we let ourselves in. That's when we see blood oozing out of the refrigerator's water dispenser. It had filled up the spill container and was leaking onto the floor and made this giant puddle. My wife screamed and I freaked out. I fully expected to see my mom's head in the freezer. The house is caught in this eerie half-light. No sound or movement. There doesn't seem to be anyone around. I holler both of their names into the house and get no response. A sour pit is churning in my stomach, and I'm starting to really entertain the idea that the worst has happened. It's not hard to do when you're seeing exactly what you didn't want to see. I nervously opened the freezer to find a bag of frozen cherries that had been opened, crammed into the freezer so that it fell onto the ice dispenser and then melted. My mom turned out to be in the shower just warming up. Ex-boyfriend was nowhere to be found. We told her about the cherry incident, to which she gave us this funny look and asked us to show her. She claimed she never even bought frozen cherries. Didn't have any. Those weren't hers. We think the ex-boyfriend bought them, opened them, and then arranged them in the freezer so they'd thaw and drip, like a weird, ominous power move. For Dayton, Ohio, Christmas time of 1992 would become synonymous with a group whose name would haunt the city for many, many years to come. The Downtown Posse. Since their meeting during a night of drinking just 2 weeks prior, 22-year-old Marvalis Keene and his 16-year-old girlfriend Laura Taylor had been inseparable. Laura had recently been kicked out of her parents' house. She had no job and had quickly become financially dependent on Marvalis, who had burned through what little cash he had, keeping her entertained. Around 2 weeks before Christmas, the couple spent the last of their cash on a single night stay in a downtown Dayton hotel and were desperate for money. Fortunately, Laura had an idea. She knew a man named Joseph Wilkerson who had a rather lucrative job at General Motors, a man who spent a sizable amount of his disposable income on sexual deviancy. The plan was simple. Laura would call Joseph, invite him to an orgy in exchange for a sizable amount of cash. Once they knew he had the cash on hand, they could get into his home with the help of a fellow member, Heather Matthews, and rob him. But the raid turned into something far more horrific than a simple smash and grab. On Christmas Eve, once Marvalis, Heather, and Laura had forced their way into Joseph's home at 3321 Prescott Avenue, they tied him to a bed with electrical cord, torturing him until he gave up the cash. But once the money was secured, Marvalis used a .32 caliber Derringer to execute their victim, so he couldn't report them to the police. After the murder, the trio made themselves at home, raiding Joseph's fridge and playing loud music, before stealing his car, which now facilitated their killing spree.
What came next can only be described as a frenzy of violence. The next victim was Danita Gillette, who was shot multiple times while using a payphone at 517 Neal Avenue. There was no plan this time. It seemed like they just shot a totally random person in the middle of the street before jumping out of a stolen car and taking her shoes, jacket, and a backpack. After they were apprehended by the police, the surviving members of the downtown posse would admit that the sole motivation for Danita's cold-blooded murder was to steal her brand new sneakers. The third victim that night was a man named Jeffrey Wright, who was shot 4 times while standing outside of 157 Yuma Place. Thankfully, he was lucky enough to survive the attack, but as it turned out, Jeffrey had a personal connection to the group. He was the ex-boyfriend of Heather Matthews, who was, by that time, in a relationship with another downtown posse member, DeMarcus Smith, and it was he who pulled the trigger 4 times, hitting Jeffrey in both legs. Fortunately, he was able to escape to a neighbor's house and get himself some medical assistance. The downtown posse then rested for the night, but planned on resuming their spree the very next day. As the sun set on Christmas Day 1992, the group had decided on their next victim, a man named Richard Maddox, and he too had a connection to the posse. He was Laura Taylor's ex-boyfriend, who was lured from his parents' house with the promise of reconciliation. He picked her up in his car, and the pair then drove around discussing their past relationship. But unbeknownst to Richard, the rest of the downtown posse followed close behind. Richard soon figured out that he was being tailed. He grew nervous and attempted to make a quick getaway. And that's when Laura put the Derringer pistol to his head and pulled the trigger, killing him instantly. Then, as the car was about to crash, Laura threw herself out of the moving vehicle and was then picked up by the fellow gang members. On the following day, Sarah Abraham was working at the family-owned Shortstop Mini Market on West 5th Street when the posse entered the store. Once again, Laura Taylor seemed to be leading the group in selecting their victims, scouting ahead and entering the store first to ensure that they would not be overwhelmed or outnumbered. She was followed by DeMarcus and Marvalis, who shot Sarah in the face before wounding a customer who was just picking up groceries. Sarah would survive for 5 days in the hospital, but eventually she would succumb to the complications stemming from those wounds. Immediately following that Shortstop shooting, the posse made their way to Salem Avenue, where they found a woman airing up her tires at a gas station. As soon as the woman saw them approaching with guns drawn, she fled. But it wasn't this that saved her life. It later came to light that Laura Taylor had demanded that Marvalis shoot her as soon as she ran, but he hesitated, and the woman was able to make her escape. It's a highly disturbing detail that the youngest and seemingly most innocent of the 4 was evidently the most bloodthirsty. The posse then stole the woman's black Dodge Shadow, the same car that was pulled over in a traffic stop that led to their arrest. In the aftermath of them being apprehended, the group told the police where to find 2 more bodies, those of Wendy Cottrell and Marvin Washington. Their bodies were at the city-owned gravel dump, located at 1654 Richley Drive. These 2 were members of the posse that Laura Taylor ordered the execution of because she believed they knew too much and would break under police pressure. They told the 2 soon-to-be victims they all wanted to party and told them to get in the car. A short while later, Marvalis pulled the car over into the gravel pit, ordered Wendy and Marvin to get out, and then he and DeMarcus shot them in cold blood. It's terrifying that the downtown posse quickly went from killing for financial gain to just killing for the thrill of it, and all during the most festive time of the year, when families of the victims would have been extra devastated to learn their loved one's demise, given that Christmas is such a family-oriented holiday. Perhaps the only solace we can take in this case is to learn that Marvalis Keene was executed for his part in the murders, and the families of the victims managed to get some measure of justice.
Truckers have rules. Some are written and some aren't. And one of these unwritten ones is that you never trust a shortcut at night. Roads that save you 30 minutes in daylight can cost you everything once the sun goes down. And I broke that rule. I was running late, behind schedule, and the GPS swore this country road was gonna shave half an hour off my route. I've been driving 14 hours straight. Eyelids were now heavy, coffee not doing much but souring my gut. I told myself 30 minutes was definitely worth it, as well as telling myself that the machine knew better than me. The turnoff was easy to miss, just this sagging sign for a farm to market road, half buried in the weeds. The asphalt was cracked, striping long gone. I slowed and swung my rig onto it and watched the highway disappear in my mirrors. And those first few miles, it was absolutely fine. Empty, but fine. Fields of corn leaning in like they wanted to listen. Half-lit farmhouses here and there. A rusted barn occasionally as well. Then the road began to narrow. Asphalt gave way to dirt. My headlights bounced over ruts, dust curling up in the beams. Trees were crowding closer, blotting out the sky. I gripped my wheel tighter, telling myself that I'd be back on the main highway soon enough. The GPS still showed that blue line ahead, urging me forward. And that's when I saw the first one, this old Buick, stripped down to its frame, sunk in the ditch with weeds growing through the windows. A mile later, a pickup with no doors, its cab peppered with bullet holes. Another mile or two and there was 2 SUVs now, gutted like fish, resting nose to nose in the trees. Okay, it's a vehicle dumping ground. Rural folks leave junk everywhere. But my throat was dry and my stomach was telling me that this wasn't just junk. These were leftovers. The dirt track dipped off into the hollow and that's when I saw the first glow, orange flickering like a campfire. As I came around the bend, the beams of my headlights caught them. 3 figures standing around a barrel fire in the middle of the road. Shadows were stretched long and sharp across the dirt. They didn't scatter like deer, they didn't wave at me like farmers or hunters. They just stood there, watching, hands at their sides, fire lighting up their faces. They didn't really look surprised to see me at all. I downshifted and slowed my rig, and one of them stepped forward. He had something long in his hand. It was metal and caught the firelight. A crowbar maybe, or maybe a rifle. It was hard to tell. My heart began slamming in my chest, and the GPS line still said continue straight, but I knew damn well this wasn't a road anymore. This was a trap. I kept the rig crawling, engine primed, headlights washing over the 3 of them like they were part of the road itself. None of them flinched, didn't move either, just stared at me. One with the metal rod, shifting in his weight, and then lifted it slightly, and I finally saw what it actually was. A length of pipe, capped on one end. Not a tool, but definitely a weapon. Every instinct screamed at me to swing wide, gun it, blast past them. But the road was far too narrow, the ditch was extremely deep, and the trees were pressing in tightly. If I tried to swerve, I'd jackknife the trailer and that would be the end of me. The guy in the middle raised his hand like a cop signaling to stop. My headlights painted his face. He wasn't old, maybe mid-20s. His eyes were flat and greasy, like he wasn't fully there. That kind of stare that tells you he's already decided what's about to happen. I braked slowly, praying this was just some kind of local screwing with me. My hand slipped on the wheel, my palms were sweating. It was almost so bad that it felt like oil. And that's when the others began to move as well, from the tree line. More shadows peeled off, 4, maybe 5 of them. They slipped into the ditches and then climbed the berms, boots crunching, all moving toward my rig now. Trap confirmed. I shifted back up, revving the engine hard. The guy with the pipe stepped closer, right into the glow of my brights. He pointed the pipe at my windshield like he was sighting me in. Then I saw him smirk. And that smirk absolutely broke me. I stomped the accelerator and the rig screamed, diesel roaring as I barreled forward. He didn't jump clear, he actually braced, like he was gonna stop 40 tons of steel with his own body. I didn't have time to consider his insanity. I watched him vanish underneath my grill, felt the sickening bump of impact rattle through the cab, and then I was past the fire. The barrel rolled, sparks spilling across the dirt, but it wasn't over yet. The figures scrambled on both sides. One leapt at the steps of the cab, hand slapping the metal, another smashing something against my trailer. The sound of breaking glass was exploding behind me. The rear marker lights had now shattered. I kept the pedal buried though. The dirt road twisted, my rig bouncing hard, but I still didn't lift my foot. The branches clawed at either side of the trailer, snapping like gunfire. The mirrors showed chaos behind me, the fire now shrinking, shadows darting, somebody running after me with arms pumping like pistons. Then headlights flared up behind me. And not just one set, two, maybe three. Engines gunned, tires sprayed dirt, and suddenly I was no longer the hunter, I was the prey. They were in vehicles that I had not seen parked, hidden somewhere deeper in the trees waiting. The GPS blue line was useless now, frozen, spinning, and recalculating. I didn't need it to tell me what I already knew. I had miles of dirt track ahead of me, and a pack behind me. The Crown Vic from earlier, a battered pickup, and something else low-slung with a screaming engine. They came in fast and reckless, almost like they'd done this chase 100 times before. My trailer fishtailed and mud sprayed. I fought the wheel and felt the back tires bite again. My whole world shrank into a tunnel of my headlights and vibrating wheel in my hands. And then the first shot rang out. Glass exploded on the passenger side, a spider web cracking across the lower pane. My ears rang, and somebody had fired from the pickup, very close now, headlights blinding in my mirror. I ducked low, keeping one hand on the wheel, and jerked the rig left, then right. The trailer rocked, tires screamed. One of them overcommitted. I think the Crown Vic clipped the ditch and flipped, sparks and steel tumbling in my rear view. But the others continued coming. Another shot, closer. A hole punched through the passenger mirror now, the glass raining down in shards. I swore loudly, shifted down, then redlined the engine. The road then suddenly opened up into this wide stretch, fields on either side, no trees. Moonlight turned the dirt silver. Then I spotted a sign half buried in the weeds. County road ends. Bridge out. My stomach dropped. I couldn't stop, not with them behind me. The bridge was nothing more than this rotted span across a shallow creek. I saw it in the last second. Half the planks were gone, support beams sagging. But it was too late. I hit it doing 50. My trailer shuddered, wood splintered like bone. And for a second I was airborne, stomach in my throat. And then the front tires slammed the dirt on the other side. Metal screamed, sparks lit up, but somehow, by some miracle, the trailer didn't shear off. Behind me, that pickup wasn't so lucky. It hit the gap far too slow, and the front end cleared, but the back axle snapped, dragging it down nose first into that creek bed. One engine still screamed. The low-slung car had made it across, fishtailing wildly, still chasing. The headlights swerved, drawing closer and closer until it pulled up alongside me. I saw the driver now, close enough to smell oil and cigarettes through that busted-out window. His face was painted with something, black streaks under his eyes like war paint. He was screaming something that I couldn't hear, and it sounded like some kind of cry. Then he jerked his wheel toward me. Metal slammed metal, my cab rattled, and I fought the wheel and pushed back. The two of us locked in this deadly dance at 50 miles an hour. He tried again, slamming into me, only this time I was ready. I jerked left, forcing him into the ditch. His headlights veered, his car tipped. Then he was gone, rolling and flipping, steel shrieking as it tore itself apart. Silence only followed me now, only my engine was the only thing making noise. I kept the pedal down, heart still jackhammering, hands shaking so bad I could still even grip the wheel. Then the GPS chimed in, calm as anything. Rejoining highway in 2 miles. I almost laughed. Almost. 2 miles never felt so far in my life, and that dirt track bucked under my tires, each rut threatening to snap an axle. Every single shadow out in those fields twitching like it wanted to step out onto the road. My ears were ringing from the gunshots, and my hands were now welded to that wheel. I continued checking the mirrors, waiting to see more headlights reappear, waiting for another engine to scream up behind me, but there was nothing, just black fields and broken fences under the moonlight. The GPS purred like it hadn't just tried to feed me to the wolves. In 1 mile, turn left. When I saw the highway again glowing faint under the moonlight, I could have cried. Pavement, civilization, lifeline. I hit the turn so fast my tires were squealing, trailer tipping dangerously before it slammed back down. I shot back onto the interstate like I'd been launched from a cannon. 60, 70, 80. I didn't care, I'm not stopping. But adrenaline really will only last for so long. After 10 minutes of white-knuckle driving, I eased back, checked my gauges, and listened for anything wrong with my rig. The grill was bent, one mirror was gone, and the marker lights were busted, but she was still running, still alive, unlike them. I pulled into a truck stop 45 minutes later. Lights bright, pumps humming, people inside, real people. I parked crooked and staggered out of my cab, then went straight to the bathroom to splash some cold water on my face. The reflection that looked back at me was pale, eyes wide, pupils like pinholes. My shirt was completely soaked in sweat. I didn't call the cops, didn't even tell another driver. What would I really say? That a gang in the middle of woods tried to hunt me down on a dirt road that my GPS told me to take? That I ran a man down with 40 tons of steel just to make it out alive? I really doubt that anybody would believe me. And even if they did, out here in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't really matter. I got back in my rig, hands still gently shaking, and I made a promise to myself. Never again. Never trust the blue line. Never take a road that you don't know. But occasionally late at night when the interstate goes empty and the CB chatter dies out, I still will think about that shortcut, about those stripped cars rusting in ditches, the barrel fire lighting up the trees, and that smirk on that kid's face before I hit him. Gravel crunches under the tires as I ease down that last stretch of a dirt road. The air thins out up here. Pine trees crowd the hillsides. Dark water spreads wide and flat up ahead. The reservoir, nobody else around. That's good. I kill the engine and my daughter kicks her door open before I've even unbuckled my seatbelt. She's got the tackle box in one hand, the rod in the other, already marching up to the shoreline, 15 years old and impatient as hell. I grab the cooler and the net and then follow her down the slope. The water is cold. A breeze ripples across it, carrying the creak of the pines. I scan the bank, the sand, the rocks, and the brush. Quiet. Too quiet maybe, but I guess that's really what we came for. Just us, no crowds, no phones, no other buzzing. I glance over and see a tent, half collapsed, staked right at the edge of the water, maybe about 15 yards down. No car, no boots outside, just nylon sacking, door flap open, shadows inside it. Somebody else beat us to it, my daughter says. She sounds annoyed. I tell her not to worry, place is big enough for two. But I feel my stomach shift. Tent looks all wrong, like it's been there for quite some time. We end up settling a little ways off and she sets up quick, hooks her bait and casts out into the water. The bobber plunks and drifts off. I unpack the cooler, crack open a soda, and just try to shake off the unease in the air. Then I take note of the tackle box that's near that tent. It's not ours, just sitting in the dirt, lid open, lures spilling out like teeth. Hey, I call out to my daughter, nodding toward it. You see that? She follows my gaze and then frowns. Yeah, weird. We continue fishing anyway. Time drags on, but no bites. And throughout that time, I keep glancing over at the tent, waiting for somebody to crawl out, to stretch, to wave, to do something, but nothing happens. The flap just flutters in the wind and the whole thing sags a little lower. The sun slowly slides down the back of the ridge. The air cools fast. I row us out in that inflatable dinghy. My daughter balanced in the front, line trailing in the water. Dad? She says. Her voice makes me turn quickly. She's pointing down. Beneath us, maybe 10 feet below, the headlights glowing dull and green. A car, submerged doors open, weeds waving out like hair. The reflection ripples across the surface, lighting up her now pale face. I grip the oars, throats now dry. My first thought, an accident. Somebody drove off the road. My second thought, it's been down there for a while. Where the hell is the report? Where the hell are the people? The breeze then dies and the water flattens. And that's when he steps out of the tree line. Barefoot, clothes dripping wet, sticking to his skin, moving slowly and steadily down toward that tent. He sees us. Then he starts walking straight into the reservoir. I dig the oars deep, water slapping against the dinghy, plastic flexing underneath us. My daughter twists around, eyes wide, as she watches him. He continues though, he doesn't stop. The man wades out, knees, thighs, waist, water black around him. He doesn't really swim, he doesn't break stride, he just kind of keeps walking, shoulders rolling slow. Dad, go! I yank harder, the oars bite, the dinghy skates across the surface, but I still hear him, water churning behind us. He's not fast at all, but he is steady. His face is pale, his lips pulled in tight, teeth clenched, eyes wide and fixed on us. He keeps staring at us like we're already caught. The boat drags and something snags underneath us. I look down. Weed or rope, I can't tell. I yank an oar free and jab at it, and my daughter screams. He's gotten closer now, waist deep, shoulders breaking the water. He still hasn't slowed down. He actually snags my daughter's fishing line and starts yanking on her rod. Cut the line, I shout to her. Her rod's still out, line stretching taut. She fumbles, hands shaking, knife scraping out of the tackle box. She saws at it, plastic wheel whining. Snap and the line breaks. I slam both oars, dig deep, and the boat lurches free, shoots forward. I don't stop. My arms burn and my chest feels like it's about to split open. Then I glance back and he's gone. The water ripples. Empty. I spin the dinghy searching. The tent on shore sagging in black, pines hissing with the wind, but there's nothing on the bank. Where is he? My daughter whispers. And then the dinghy jolts, a hard knock from below it. We both scream and I almost lose the oars. Another thud, harder this time, shaking the boat. Water splashes over the side. He's under us. Move, she cries to me. I row blind, wild. The boat jerks forward, then stalls again, and something scrapes the bottom. Nails on plastic. The dinghy rocks hard, and she clutches onto the side. A hand then bursts up through the water, pale and slick, fingers crawling at the rim of the boat. Nails were blue, skin wrinkled like it'd been soaking in it for weeks. I swing and the oar smashes down, the crack of wood on bone, and the hand slips under and vanishes quickly. The boat spins, my daughter's sobbing. I row harder, every stroke sloppy and desperate. The shoreline draws closer and closer, 10 feet, then 5, and I hit gravel. She leaps out, scrambling up on the bank. I drag the dinghy halfway out, chest heaving, heart pounding in my skull. The water settles and silence follows. The tent hangs limp beside us, flap open like a mouth. Get to the truck, I pant. I shove her ahead and glance back over my shoulder. The reservoir is glass, no ripples and no sign of that man. We sprint uphill and my boots slip on the shale, my lungs tearing open. The truck glows in the sunlight, our salvation. I fumble with the keys in my pocket. My daughter's already clawing at the handle and she yanks open the door, hauls herself inside. I jam the key twist and engine coughs and sputters and won't catch. Come on, come on. And then I hear it, another sound behind us, the slap of bare feet onto gravel, slow and steady, getting closer and closer. When I look up in the mirror, he's there, walking up the center of the dirt road, soaked clothes hanging, hair plastered to his skull. His smile still hasn't changed. His hands hang limp, swinging easy. The truck engine coughs again and dies. My daughter's full out crying now, rocking in her seat. I slam the key again and pump the pedal, praying. The man keeps walking, 10 yards, 9, 8, and finally, the engine roars to life. I slam it into reverse, tires spitting out gravel. My headlights wash over him. He doesn't flinch, doesn't raise a hand, just walks straight into the beam. I floor it. The truck shoots backward, gravel spraying and then spins, fishtailing onto the track. My daughter rips out another scream and clutches the dash. I stomp the gas and the reservoir vanishes, pines whip by, black and endless. I don't look in the mirror, not even once. But I swear even over the engine's roar, I can still hear those footsteps on gravel keeping pace. I don't lift my foot, and the truck screams up that dirt road, bouncing hard enough to rattle our teeth. Branches lash at the windows. Gravel spits under the tires. My daughter curled up against the seat, fists in her hair, sobbing uncontrollably. The road then curves, straightens, and dips, and I keep it pinned, 80 on a track built for 20. The wheel jerks and tries to tear from my grip, but I hang on. Slowly, the reservoir falls away behind us. Black water, blacker trees. And I tell myself, it's gone, it's done. But my skin says differently. My skin says, he's still there. I risk one look into the rear view, but there's nothing, just dust hanging in the air. I want to believe it, but the steering wheel shakes under my hands and I realize it's not the road, it's me. I'm the one shaking that hard. When we finally hit pavement, it was a miracle. The truck surges onto the country road, tires screaming, and then grips solid. My chest caves with relief, and my daughter finally looks up, tears streaking across her face, lips trembling. "Is he gone?" she whispers to me. I want to tell her yes, God, I want to, but the word dies off in my throat. Headlights bloom up ahead, oncoming, a sedan silver creeping slowly. It flashes its brights once, then twice. I ease the truck right, hands slippery on the wheel. The sedan doesn't pass, it slows and it pulls in behind us. My daughter sees it too, her nails digging into my arm. The car stays back, just far enough that the headlights blur, and just close enough that we can't forget it's there. As I press harder on the gas, the sedan matches me. And we ride like that for miles and miles, me pushing 80, it shadowing us, no closer, no further, just locked in. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it turns off, no signal, no brake lights, just gone off into a dirt cut, swallowed up quickly by the trees around it. Silence fills the cab and my daughter slumps against the door, completely spent. I grip the wheel until my knuckles ache, and I'm just afraid if I let go, everything will unravel. We don't stop. Not until we hit town and file up a police report. The car is found in the water, no bodies, and no suspects.
It was Black Friday of 2013. My local Best Buy always opened earlier than other stores, and Best Buy was known to have the best deals. I was searching for a new laptop for school as I'd be starting college in the spring, and Best Buy seemed like the ideal store for that. I didn't need some super advanced computer, just a system that can help me do simple tasks. Now, this was when Black Friday was peak, when companies didn't gaslight customers into thinking they lowered prices like they do now. If you've gone shopping on Black Friday these past few years, you know what I'm talking about. There were about 30 plus people already camped out in front of the Best Buy to get their hands on the best deals. It was around 5 a.m. and everyone was eager for them to open any minute. The second they did, everyone stormed the building, getting their hands on basically everything in sight. I knew I had to be fast, so I hurried to the electronics section and grabbed the cheapest laptop and headed to the register. I buy it and leave the store back out into the parking lot into my car, just wanting to go home and back to sleep. Surprisingly, the parking lot was mostly empty and there weren't many people out as I thought. As I'm getting in my car, ready to drive home, I see something unexpected that completely caught me off guard. Out in the parking lot was a young boy, maybe around 9, approaching my car. He wore a bright, oversized jacket and appeared to be cautious about something. He goes up to my car and lightly taps on my window, motioning for me to roll it down. Now, I've seen too many horror movies to be stupid enough to do that, so I roll it down just a tad to be able to talk to him. Right off the bat, he seems shaken up by something and asks me if I had any spare change for food. Now, I never carry cash on me, and when I do, it's spent very quickly. However, just in case, I check the glove compartment where I would normally keep change and see I had a $50 bill. Though I wasn't trying to give a kid $50, so I politely said that I didn't have any, but that I'd be happy to buy him food. There was a long pause before he said that it was fine and that he'd ask someone else. It was then when I started to realize that he didn't appear to have anyone with him. No parents, no friends, no relatives, nothing. That's when I glanced past him and saw someone hiding behind one of the cars from a distance. I'm unsure if they saw I had spotted them, but I didn't want to take the chance that they did. After putting two and two together, I sped out of the parking lot just wanting to get home. I told the kid that I had to go and that I hope things work out for him. Call me cruel or whatever, I was not about to get robbed or whatever sick trap this was. Anyway, I drive home and finally get some rest until the next morning where I told my family about my encounter. I remember them scolding me about how I was incompetent and that I should have called the police right then. Now, I could understand calling the cops, but even if I did, chances are the kid and that other person would both be gone. It's also worth noting that police in this area never actually took anything too seriously unless it was a severe crime. About a month goes by and my family and I are at my godfather's house for Christmas when my mom saw a chilling article from our town. There were reports of 2 children going missing in that area, one of them being the kid I had seen. Turns out, he had been missing for over a year and police had released his photo. Remember when I said police in my city weren't on top of their game? Yeah, well, this is one prime example of that. I had reported my sighting of him to police, but nothing ever became of it. Till this day, I strongly believe that someone had been using him as a decoy to convince people to do shady stuff, and I almost fell for it. It's been over 10 years now, and he was found deceased by a canal just a few months from my encounter. The news said it was the result of natural causes, but I've always wondered about that. My family and I live in Georgia and would sometimes visit our extended family in Virginia for the holidays. This happened in 2009, and we had been invited to stay with them for Thanksgiving for a few days. We rarely saw each other, so we wanted to spend as much time with them as possible. They lived in a rural part of Albemarle County, and their house was massive. We had other family flying in from around the US and planned on having enough food for 40+ people. It's a very long and boring ride up there, but we get there before noon and have time to mess around and talk with them. And we, kids, start to play around in the downstairs basement playing the Wii and whatnot until it was time for dinner. Us and our cousins are down there for a good while when we get bored and decided to play hide and seek. We were always glued to the video games, so we decided to switch it up a bit and play something productive, if that made sense. We each play bubblegum to decide who would seek first. It was later decided that it would be me, and so I gave everyone a minute to go hide while I counted down. Mind you, this basement was huge, so there were so many places to hide. However, the only rule was that we could only hide in the basement and not the house itself. Long story short, I count down and begin tossing the place, trying to find them any way I could. Searching rooms, under tables, behind couches, and even in the dryer. As I make my way past one of the hallways down there, I notice a large blue tarp laying on stuff in the boiler room. I remember somewhat laughing and quietly tiptoe over to the blue tarp, expecting to see one of my cousins hiding underneath it. Without hesitation, I yanked the tarp off, but did not see any of my cousins. Instead, I saw a man, maybe in his mid-30s, staring right through my soul. I watch as he puts his finger to his lips, doing a hushing sound while giving me this wicked grin. I screamed so loud that all of my cousins came out of hiding and freaked out at the sight of him. It did not take long for my dad and uncle to come down to see what was wrong. When they saw this man, they did not hesitate to tackle him. The fight was over pretty fast, with both my dad and uncle delivering several blows to his face. My uncle was able to identify him as my aunt's ex-boyfriend who had somehow found his way into the house. God only knows what he was planning on doing or why he was here. According to my aunt, she hadn't seen him in years, which only made the situation even more unsettling. He was later arrested and charged with breaking and entering. There were rumors around the family about assault taking place, but that hasn't been confirmed nor denied. I was still a kid back then, and looking back at it now, it's much more terrifying to think what he could have possibly been doing. Walmart and Target not only attract the weirdest people, but also dangerous people. This isn't the type of story to have you on the edge of your seat type of story, but man, is this something we never expected. It was Black Friday of 2013, which meant my brothers and I were going video game shopping. Video games for consoles were peak during this time, so everyone and their grandma were eager to get their hands on the new games. This was especially true with Grand Theft Auto 5, a game that was taking over the world at the time, and we were definitely not going to risk not getting it. My mom gave us each $200, which was also our Christmas present, meaning we'd pretty much have to buy our own gifts. We were approaching that age where our parents knew we no longer believed in Santa, hence why they were doing this. We started with Target, which was pretty busy, even in the morning trying to look for the game. However, most of the aisles in the store were cleared, meaning that the game was likely gone. Disappointed, but also not surprised, we walk over to the gaming section and see that it had been ransacked as well. I remember my brother yelling a "God damn it" when we see a man we had never seen before approach us. He calmly asks what was wrong, and we had just told him we were disappointed that the game we wanted was sold out. To our surprise, he introduced himself as the assistant store manager and that he actually had 2 extra games in one of the back offices. We were extremely confused as, even though he claimed to work here, he wasn't wearing anything that would resemble a manager or even an employee. Apparently, the games were originally on hold, and I guess the person who wanted it never came to get them. He tells for us boys to go with him to the back so that he could get them for us. Mind you, we were both 14 at the time, so we didn't even question him or think twice about it. We follow him to the back of the store where he opens the door to a room with a desk and computer. He grabs a plastic bag off the desk and hands us each a copy of the game we've been after. Then he tells us to go pay up front, and we gladly do. At this point, we were both thrilled and thought we had lucked out by the manager. We bought the games and left the store with smiles on our faces, talking about how we were the luckiest people alive. Before calling our mom to come pick us up, my brother suggested we go over to another store to look at some more stuff. We go over to another store, but don't end up buying anything as we were low on money. With nothing to do, we then call our mom to come pick us up, and she arrives within a few minutes as she was already close by. We get home and are immediately eager to play our games. I let my brother go first, and I watch as he unwraps the plastic film of the case. However, what happened next was something that shocked us both. My brother was expecting to see a game disc, but instead saw a flattened plastic Ziploc bag folded in where the disc was supposed to be. He takes it out, and inside the bag was what appeared to be a yellowish substance in the form of powder. Out of curiosity, my brother opens the bag and instantly starts coughing hysterically. I scream for my mom as I try to sit him upright to get him to relax. This utterly terrified me because it wasn't the normal cough you'd hear. His were more severe, and he was wheezing as if he were gasping for air. My mom storms into the living room in a panic and tells me to call 911 while she proceeded to perform CPR. My mom is an RN, so I let her do what she needed to do. It didn't take long for an ambulance to arrive and get my brother moving. By the time they got here, my brother was pale as a ghost with major discoloration. Just to be safe, I opened my game, and sure enough, there was another small bag in it containing the same thing. I didn't even dream of touching it and just let the police deal with it. My brother was rushed to the hospital where he was treated for toxic fumes and would survive. It took a while for him to go back to normal though. For weeks after, he had been coughing here and there as well as having blurry vision until it eventually went away. As it turns out, that so-called manager at Target was no manager after all. He was a local druggie impersonating a store worker to try and get rid of whatever he gave us. He must have thought that giving it to unsuspecting teens would be the best way to go about it. How he managed to impersonate a store employee without getting caught is anyone's guess. Police say that he couldn't have been there long as someone would have noticed. My brother is doing fine now and has just graduated college with his bachelor's in pre-med. As for the employee imposter, I have no idea what happened to him. I don't know if he was ever caught, locked in prison, died in a car crash, or is still out there. I'd like to think that he was thrown in jail, but something tells me otherwise. Back before my girlfriend Eliza and I started dating, we hung out all the time as good friends. We both obviously didn't have the same feelings for each other back then, but we did enjoy each other's company. This happened around the time where we both started to feel that there was something more to our relationship than friends. It was the winter of 2018, and we both had planned a skiing trip up to Vermont. Vermont had really good slopes, and with us having some experience with skiing, we were up for a challenge. We rented out a hotel room close to the ski resort as it seemed the most convenient for us. We took the gondola ride up to the mountain and had a great time skiing. As much as people don't like the idea of skiing, it was actually really fun if you practiced. That being said, we spent most of the day skiing and having a blast. Apart from the ski resort was a hiking trail and lodge for people who either didn't want to go skiing or if people wanted a break. It was nearing the end of the day, and Eliza suggested we take the hour-long hike around the mountain. Now, this hike was sort of a do-it-at-your-own-risk type of hike, meaning there was no trail guide or anything like that. The only thing we had as a guide was some painted markings around the trees to know where we were going. Even though it was a beginner's hike, it was still really easy to get lost in these woods. Eliza and I started our hike, just enjoying ourselves and whatnot. We're about 20 minutes into the hike when she has the urge to pee. It wouldn't be for another 50 minutes or so before we reached an actual bathroom, so she said she'd go into the woods and that she'd be back. I watch as she walks off the path and into the woods before disappearing behind a large tree. She went pretty far off, but I thought she just needed extra privacy, especially us being on our first trip together. However, as the minutes passed, she never returned to the path and I didn't even see her. I then thought to myself, what could she possibly be doing that's taking her so long? I thought. At this point, she had been gone for a good 10 minutes, and that's when I started to get worried. I step out of the trail and follow her footpath to try and find out where she went. Thank God I see her standing by a small clearing with her phone out. Then she motions for me to go to her. When I walk up to her, I see what she stopped for. In this small clearing was what I could only describe as huge bones. Maybe bear, maybe horse, I don't know. The majority of the bones were organized in circles, and even some formed into a teepee of sorts. There were also some smaller bones hanging from trees by some string. I asked Eliza what the hell this was. As expected, she didn't know, and we began to wonder if the resort knew about this. There was also what appeared to be a half-formed humanoid snowman-type sculpture next to the bones, indicating that someone had recently been here. All of a sudden, we both began to get a strange feeling that we were being watched, and we got out of there ASAP. We were not going to stick around to find out who or what made this, as it didn't strike me as anything good. We told the resort, but we never heard anything back from them after our trip. In the off chance that the bones were fake, it could have very well been someone easily pranking us. However, I'm not sure if I believe that. We're now a couple and plan on getting married soon, but we'll always have this story to share. In 2011, I moved to a college in Colorado during the winter for my master's degree in psychology. The school had a really good program, and a master's was mandatory for my career. My financial aid covered housing, and I had a single dorm that sat right on the edge of campus. Most of my classmates were nice, and my professors were some of the best, especially at an Ivy League school. Mid-semester, I had my midterm coming up and had a lot of homework to do. Living in a one-bedroom dorm with basically no friends, I decided that I'd take a walk to the woods beside the dorms. It was nicknamed Jordan's Forest. I still don't know who Jordan was or why it was called that, but a lot of students would commonly go there to smoke and stuff. I was never into that and hoped for a moment to myself with nobody around. So anyway, there I am, heading down the trail, keeping to myself when I decide to sit down by the old fountain hidden deeper into the woods. Apparently the fountain used to belong to a fraternity at one point. However, I guess they haven't used it in a while, as the fountain was hanging by a thread and appeared to have been unkept for years. As I'm sitting by the fountain, just reflecting on life, I hear footsteps in the snow from behind me. I turn around, and standing there is a man with a jacket and hat on. He gives me a friendly gesture as a way to say hello, and me, being the shy person I was, gave him a quick smile. He then comes up to me and introduced himself as Doug. As I said, I wanted to be alone with myself at the moment, and having someone else nearby really killed the mood. However, I didn't want to come off as rude, so I tell him my name and went on my phone to act busy. Right away, something seemed off about him, and he didn't exactly look like a college student. If I had to guess, I'd say he had to be in his late 30s or maybe early 40s. He proceeds to sit down beside me while keeping a short distance before saying, "So, is this your first time on campus?" he said. "Yeah, I just started my master's," I said. He looks at me with a smirk and says, "Oh, I see. Well, you'll love it here. You seem so young and bright. You do fine." I thank him for the compliment and tend to my phone to try and talk to him the least I could, hoping he'd get the hint. After some minor small talk, I finally say it's getting colder and that I was gonna head back to my dorm. As I'm walking away, I could just feel his eyes glued to the back of me, and the minute I turned around, I saw him staring at me. It wasn't until then where I started walking a little faster, hoping he wasn't following me. When I created a safe enough distance, I checked behind me once more and didn't see him. I breathed a sigh of relief and entered my dorm to continue studying for my midterm. However, as I was studying, I couldn't stop thinking about that man. I'm not one to be judgmental or anything, but he didn't strike me as a student at all. I'm not saying older people don't go back to school, they do, but there was indeed something off about him. I studied for another 2 hours or so when I decide to call it there and settle in for the night. I freshen up in the shower when my friend from my home state calls me via FaceTime. This is someone who I haven't spoken to in weeks, so I step out of the shower with my robe on and gladly answer it. She was mentioning about how she got a new job and how she just moved in with her boyfriend. Basically a bunch of life stuff. We're talking on the phone for a good hour or so when I decide to lean my phone against some books so the camera is on me. She continues her story and such when she suddenly stops mid-sentence and looks at me strangely. When I ask her what was wrong, she says that there's someone looking into my room from the window. My blood ran cold and I turn around and see what I can only describe as Doug peeking through my window. The second he spots me, he ducks down out of view. I begin telling my friend that I had met this man earlier and didn't know who he was. She recommended I call campus security, and I did just that. I even had my friend still on the phone with me as a way to make me feel like I was with someone. As I'm on the phone with security, I hear my doorknob start to move and someone trying to open it. Thankfully it was locked, but I'll never forget the voice Doug made while trying to open my door. It was this low and gravelly voice, telling me that he could easily break this door down with one kick. I'll admit, I started to shed tears right then, just wanting security to get here. When they did, they had arrived with the police, who then placed him under arrest. Turns out Doug had actually been a student here once and has since been homeless for over 5 years. His girlfriend died while they were both in school and had chose to live near campus as a way to cope, as this was the last memory of her and him together. I will say I did feel some sympathy for him, but I couldn't allow him to continue what he did to me to others. Up until recently, he was released from prison for good behavior, and the university has since banned him from being on campus grounds. I graduated with honors a year later, and I haven't returned to campus since.